All right, John, thanks so much. We are just moments away from the first big round of poll closings and the first actual results from the critical battleground state of Georgia. The Senate race there among a handful of contests that will decide which party controls the chamber, and we are ready to make our first projection. CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Tim Scott will be re-elected, defeating Crystal Matthews. There are 4 Senate races that are too early right now, too early to call. Those races are, not surprisingly, the big Senate race in Georgia between incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and football star Herschel Walker. Too early to call. Also too early to call. Races in Vermont. There is an open Senate seat between Congressman Peter Welch and the challenger Malloy. Too early to call in Vermont. Too early to call in Indiana. Incumbent Senator Todd Young running for re-election. That race too early to call. And then Kentucky, incumbent Senator Rand Paul. Too early to call right now. He is running for re-election. Let's look at the balance of power in the Senate at this hour right now. Remember, Democrats have 36 Senate seats. Republicans currently have 30 seats. 34 seats remain. And we'll be bringing those to you over the next few hours. 34 seats. Republicans only need to pick up one seat to win and regain control of the U.S. Senate. Let's go back to Georgia now, because Nick Valencia is at a voting location in Atlanta, Georgia, the biggest city in the country. And Nick, you have new information from the Secretary of State's office.
That's right. I want to start, though, by they just closed up shop here, Jake. At 7 p.m., the polls here officially closed in Georgia for most of the precincts. Here where we are in Fulton County, they just started to take away those vote here placards and close the door here, so voting has officially closed. It is quiet here, so quiet you could really hear the hum of the street lights. And just to give you an indication of how quiet it's been all day, of a registered 3,085 voters at this polling precinct, at last check, 361 cast their votes in person. I did ask the election supervisor, how many of those registered voters perhaps voted early. She said she didn't have that information, but we'd find out in just a matter of hours. There's 2,600 polling locations across the state of Georgia. 6 of them have been ordered by the courts to stay open past that 7 p.m. deadline. 2 of them in Cobb County, another 2 in DeKalb County. That's important because those are 2 of the most populated counties. Secretary of State's office also making some news earlier at a press conference saying that we should get results earlier than expected, crediting a reformed Senate voting bill that gave more clarity to county elections officials as to when they could start counting.
All right, Nick Valencia, thanks so much. And the first actual votes are coming in from Georgia for the U.S. Senate race. They're hotly contested. Let's go to Casey Hunt. Casey, what are you seeing?
Yes, they are, Jake. We are finally starting to get some votes in this race that we have been talking about literally for months. Raphael Warnock out to an early lead, 75% of the vote. He's ahead by about 15,000 votes of Herschel Walker right now, who's coming in at 24.1%. Obviously, we're going to need to ask John King at the Magic Wall exactly where this vote is coming from, because we do not expect this race to be quite so lopsided as our early totals are showing us. Again, just 1% of the vote in here. And Chase Oliver, that Libertarian candidate, he could be the one that decides whether this race goes to a runoff, because if he picks up enough and neither one of these men is above 50, we could be looking at 4 more weeks of this. Let's check in on Florida, where we are also starting to get votes. Remember, Florida counts pretty early. Val Demings out to an early lead, 63.5%, to Marco Rubio's 35.7%. Another one where we're really going to want to know where the votes are coming in here, because we do expect this to tighten as the night goes on. Just 5% of the votes in Florida. Boris, I think you've got some updates on the governor's race.
It's still very early. We're going to take a quick look at Georgia to start right now. Stacey Abrams has a lead over incumbent Republican Brian Kemp. Abrams leading by about 13,000 votes. A lopsided advantage, but keep in mind, only 1% of the vote in the Peach State, a very important state for control of the U.S. Senate. Let's get an update now, a key race alert from the state of Florida, because there, Charlie Crist, the Democrat, also in the lead against incumbent Republican Ron DeSantis. He's ahead about 100,000 votes, but only 5% of the vote in so far in the Sunshine State, Jake.
All right, well, these are just the votes coming in right now. Let's find out where they're coming from to give us an idea of the state of play and also why these races look so lopsided right now. So let's start, John, wherever you want to start, Georgia or Florida. But where is this vote coming in showing such a Democratic advantage?
Right. We are just getting started. So, again, you're looking at this map and you're a Democrat, you're very happy. You're a Republican, should you be concerned? The answer is Just wait. It's
No.
going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while. But every vote counts, right? And so you look, why is Charlie Crist ahead? Because the only votes we have out of Florida are from heavily Democratic Broward County. It'll be interesting to watch later in the night. Miami-Dade is just to the south, traditionally a big Democratic area as well. Republicans say watch Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio in Miami-Dade tonight. We'll keep an eye on that when we get those votes. But right now...
And just to interrupt for 1 second, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
That Miami-Dade thing you're talking about, that is also part of a theme that we will be following this night, maybe commenting on this night, is how much are Republicans improving their margins when it comes to the Latino vote?
Absolutely, and it's a different Latino population in Florida than it is in Arizona, that is in Nevada.
Right.
And if Republicans can build in all of those states, you go across the country, even in suburban Virginia, it's not as large a population, but it's a potential swing population.
Right.
So yes, that will be a dynamic throughout the night, throughout the week, and then in the months after, analyzing the election and what happened tonight. But the reason Charlie Crist is ahead right now, 250,000 votes, is because of Broward County. Now, you could say on the one hand, just calm down. On the other hand, if Charlie Crist is to be competitive, he needs to run it up in Broward County. So when you see these early results, you're in the Crist campaign, at least you're doing maybe what you need to do here. If you come back to the presidential race in 2020, Donald Trump won the state, but Joe Biden got 65% in Broward County. So that tells you, even if Charlie Crist is getting 65% here, Donald Trump won Florida, and you want to quite handle it.
Right. I know, we should know that right now, on these early numbers, Biden is almost at 65%. Crist is at 62%. So these margins, again, it's early, but that's an underperformance as of now. As of now, and those margins matter. Yeah,
if Charlie Crist stays there in Broward County, he will. Joe Biden was higher, and he lost the state of Florida.
Right.
So and this is where, again, it's a big county. It's second population-wise. It's about 9% of the state population. So that's the governor's race. Since we're in Florida, let's just stay in the Senate race because it's the same result, essentially. Now you're getting a little bit more votes. See, I'll go back to the governor's race in just a minute. So you come back to Broward County. Again, she's running at 63, 64%. That's great. Is it good enough? That's the question as you move in. So we're finally getting some votes out here. This is interesting in terms of by the end of the night. This says 62% of the estimated vote in Pinellas County. I would caution early on. We'll see if that holds up. Sometimes, you get the mail-in ballots, you get the other ballot. See if that number holds up. This can be a potential swing county. Pretty close, right? That's why it's a swing county. It's pretty close in the tide there.
62%. And how did Biden do
so
in
you
2020?
come to 2020, we hit presidential, and Biden gets 50. Right, that's a 50-50. This is one of your swing counties in America where you go through. It's the sixth largest in the state. It's 5% of the population. It's a tie essentially. Biden won by just a little bit here as you come through it. So let's come back to 2022. And again, it's interesting to see the early votes, and it helps you build your questions essentially. If you do what I do for a living, is how's it coming in and go. But I would, no one should jump to any conclusions here. But as we're talking, this is the wonder of election night. As we're talking, you get more. So you come up here, I'm in the House map here. Let me come back to the Senate race. And you come up here and you see, again, this is a place where the Democrats have to win. But if you come out statewide and look, we got a long way to go, right? So Val Demings is ahead early on. Senator Rubio is favored in this race. But again, this is one of these races where she was viewed as the most House member, former law enforcement official, viewed as the most competitive Democrat they could do in a state that is a Republican state.
Let's head north. Let's go to Georgia.
Let's head up to Georgia. So we see the Senate race here. And again, Raphael Warnock pulling out to an early lead. You'd always rather be ahead than behind, but look at how empty. Look at how empty. So we do have some early votes in Fulton County. You have him up 75% in Fulton County. That's what has to happen.
That's a lot, and that's a lot of the vote. That's 63% in this huge bucket of votes. Can I ask, how is Raphael Warnock compared to Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor on the very same ballot?
So this is a fundamental question we will go through the night. In Atlanta, where you have it's the largest population center, it's 10% of the statewide vote, and you have a significant African-American population, so the Democratic base. So you see Raphael Warnock at 75.3%. Remember the raw numbers, too. Sometimes the raw numbers matter. 209,000.
Okay.
And then you come over 75 and 209. You come over here 71 and 198. So, again, this is early. But if that holds up, that's a problem for Stacey Abrams.
But that means, just to translate for our viewers, that means that there are people who are going into their polling places and voting for Brian Kemp, the Republican, and then on the Senate race voting for Raphael Warnock, the Democrat,
or the Libertarian, but yes, certainly going elsewhere.
Right.
Democrats who are voting for Senate and then not voting for Stacey Abrams, whether they leave it blank or whether they're voting for Kemp or Shane Hazel. That's something at the end of the night we'll be able to add up Kemp math there and compare it to see Kemp running. There's your number right there, though, 64,796. So just shy of 65,000 so far early in the Senate race, and you see Brian Kemp at 79,000.
Yeah.
So Brian Kemp is getting more votes in hugely, overwhelmingly Democratic Fulton County than the Senate candidate. That's an incumbent Republican governor. The panel was talking about it earlier, whose brand is strong in the state. And again, if that holds up, if Brian Kemp is running there, you say 28%. You know, he's getting whooped in Fulton County, but that's not a bad number.
Yeah.
Then he has to again. The suburbs around Atlanta are likely to be blue at the end of the night. The question is Brian Kemp strong enough? Because all of this, almost all of this, is going to be red.
Two of the phenomena that we're going to be watching all night in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere is comparing how these candidates are doing with how Trump and Biden did in 2020,
right,
and whether there's outperformance, and also ticket splitting.
Yes.
Because that's going to be relevant in Georgia. It's going to be relevant in Pennsylvania. As we stand by for more votes from Georgia and Florida and other places, polling places in 3 more states are closing very soon, featuring 2 very important U.S. Senate races this election night. It's just getting started. Brew some coffee. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CNN's Election Night in America. Let me just bring you up to speed about what we're going to be looking for all night when it comes to the control of the House and the Senate. All right, in the U.S. Senate, Democrats currently have 36 seats. Republicans currently have 30 seats. We'll be looking at the 34 seats that are remaining. Remember, Republicans only need to pick up 1 net seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. Now let's take a look at the U.S. House. As of right now, Democrats, we are projecting, have won 2 seats. Republicans have won 5 seats. It is very early. 428 seats remain. Democrats and Republicans battling for that magic number of 218 needed to control the House of Representatives. That is where we are in the evening as of right now. Now, look, we're not going to be looking at all 435 seats. We're going to be looking at a very few competitive seats. It's about 82. And right now, Republicans have to win 30 of these 82 in order to regain control of the House. And Democrats need to win 53 of those competitive seats in order to hold on to control of the House. Let's go to Casey Hunt right now to give us an update on where things actually stand with the actual vote coming in on these competitive U.S. Senate races. Casey.
Sounds good, Jake. Let's start here in Florida, which has tightened since the last time we visited these numbers. 49.9% for the Democrat, Val Demings. About 13,000 or so votes separating her from incumbent Republican Senator Marco Rubio at 49.1%. So this is a much closer representation to where we actually expect this to be, but it's still very, very early in the night, only about 20-something% in of the vote in Florida. Now let's take a look at Georgia, where Warnock's still sitting up at 67.8%. That's about 145,000 votes ahead of the Republican Herschel Walker. But again, this is expected to be one of the closest races that we look at all night long. The question, does somebody hit 50% and avoid a runoff, and 4 more weeks of this, Jake?
All right, Casey, thanks so much. We are counting down to the next round of poll closings. More early tests of whether Democrats will hold or lose their control of the House and of the U.S. Senate at 7:30 Eastern. Polls will close in North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. Remember, 218 seats are needed to win control of the U.S. House of Representatives. 31 seats are at stake in the 3 states where voting is about to end. Only 5 of those races are competitive, though, but every one of them could help tilt the House majority one way or another. In the battle for the U.S. Senate, the Ohio race has been contentious. 10-term Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan facing venture capitalist and author J.D. Vance. They are vying for an open seat currently held by a Republican senator. In North Carolina, Democrat Sherry Beasley is aiming to become the state's first black senator. The former state Supreme Court justice is up against 3-term Congressman Ted Budd for an open Senate seat currently held by a retiring Republican senator. Polls close in Ohio, West Virginia, and North Carolina just moments from now. Let's check in right now with Melanie Zanona. She's in Columbus, Ohio, covering Republican Senate candidate J.D. Vance. Melanie, CNN caught up with the candidate as he arrived at campaign headquarters.
Yeah, we spotted him outside the hotel. We asked him how he is feeling, and he says, we're feeling good. He was all smiles. And I can tell you, I checked in with a campaign source, and they said the campaign right now is buzzing with excitement as the polls are about to come to a close here. They say they're seeing low turnout in Cuyahoga County. That is a strong Democratic county that includes Cleveland, that went for Joe Biden in 2020. So that's a very important county for Tim Ryan, the Democrat. I checked in with his campaign. They said that there is a potential data lag in Cleveland proper, where there's less staffing with precincts, and that they are seeing some good numbers in the suburbs, so they're encouraged by that. But as you can see, it's starting to get underway here at the election party. This is the Ohio GOP election night party. This is where Vance is. I'm told that he's been popping in and out of the war room that his team has set up here, and that he's been checking in when they're crunching numbers. But they'll know more in the next 30 minutes after the polls close. And remember, here in Ohio, it's all about the 3 Cs, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. Jake.
All right, Melanie Zanona at Vance headquarters. Let's go down to New Hampshire, where Diane Gallagher is at the headquarters of Don Bolduc. And Diane, Republicans in Washington are very bullish about Mr. Bolduc's chances to defeat and unseat an incumbent Democratic Senator, Maggie Hassan. What are they telling you up there?
They are, Jake, here as well. I spoke with a Republican close to the campaign just a bit ago who tells me they remain confident that they're seeing decent turnout in Republican strongholds here in New Hampshire, and pointed to the tightening polls just in the weeks leading up to the election. Now, I also spoke with a Democratic strategist with incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan's campaign, and they told me that they feel good where they are right now because they see strong turnout in the places they need it so far. But they cautioned it was still early. And Jake, they also noted that they always anticipated this would be a close race, pointing to the fact that Hassan won her race in 2016 by just over 1,000 votes back then. But look, there's also eyes across the nation on this race for another reason, and that's because of the Democrats' controversial approach to how they funded essentially ads that supported Bolduc in the Republican primary, thinking that he was an easier opponent because he was a more far-right candidate, an election denier, against his moderate opponent in that primary. Of course, Bolduc did win, and now they're looking at a toss-up race here, one that they say could come down to the wire in just a matter of a few votes potentially.
That's right. Play with fire, you get burned. Diane Gallagher, thank you so much, in Manchester, New Hampshire with the Bolduc campaign. David Chalian has some new exit polls from Ohio, where we're watching that big Senate race. What do you got there, Dave?
Yeah, we sort of are taking a look here at the economy in Ohio, sort of a scene setter. And I want you to take a look at how Ohio voters are experiencing the economy. We asked, what is the condition of the nation's economy? 40% say not so good, 35% say poor. So 3/4 of Ohio voters in this election say the economy is either not so good or poor. We also asked about what kind of experience are you having with inflation? And in the past year, Ohio voters, 19% of them say they've had severe hardship caused by inflation. Another 55% say they've had moderate hardship. Only 1/4 of the Ohio electorate says they've had no hardship caused by inflation. How about Biden's policies and whether or not they're helping or hurting the country? This is a rough number for Tim Ryan to see, even as he's tried to run a campaign distanced from Joe Biden. 52% of Ohio voters say Biden policies are hurting the country. Only 34% say helping, 11% say not making a difference. And Biden's just overall approval rating in Ohio, it's even a tick below, Jake, from where we see it nationally. He's only at 42% approval in Ohio among the electorate in this election, 57% disapprove. That's sort of the upstream that Tim Ryan's trying to swim in this election.
That's right. It's a very disapproving electorate in Ohio based on the exit polls. Just to remind you, what we're going to be doing all night when it comes to control of the U.S. House is looking at the competitive races, because this is where the Republicans and Democrats are either going to win or lose control of the U.S. House of Representatives. Right now, there are 8 competitive seats that are too early to call. Republicans are leading in 6 of the 8. Democrats are leading in 2 of the 8. Now, it's early yet, but that is where we are. Right now, 8 competitive seats, too early to call. Republicans in the lead of 6, the Democrats in the lead in 2. Let's go over to the magic wall right now. John King, let's talk about this, because the way that you look at whether or not there is a national mood, a wave, some phenomenon happening, is by looking at whether or not there are trends in these House races that are competitive.
Exactly right, and we'll focus on the competitive races in the district. I just want to just say, because it's early in the night, just remember, this is ahead. These candidates are ahead. 34 Republicans ahead, 19 Democrats ahead, 6 in competitive seats ahead. These races are not called yet, right? If you come over here, you see these are the races. These are uncalled races. These are called races. So when we say candidates are ahead, we mean we're not done yet, right? But we're just trying to lay out where we are in the battlefield right now. And if you just look at this number, you were focusing on the competitive races, 82 of them across the country. If this stays this way, as we start calling races, then you have a Republican House, and if it stays that way, 6-2.
That's a wave.
That would be, I don't know if it would be a wave, but it would be 20 plus, might be 25 plus, and we'd go across the country.
Well, I was going by percentages.
Yeah,
if Republicans pick up 75% of the competitive seats,
then we'd be done.
That's what I mean.
Essentially, the Democrats need to flip that. Right? That Democrats are on their heels. They cannot split the competitive seats. They cannot even win 60% of the competitive seats. They have to win even more than that. That tells you how bad the climate is. So this is the full House map as it fills in. Let's just isolate those competitive seats, because they're in very important places as you watch it play out. Again, you see the gray. These are the ones, the polls are still open, right? There's a lot of get to the West Coast. But look what's filling in so far. What do you see?
Red.
You see a lot of red.
Red.
You see a lot of red. So you have one of the races in New Hampshire. These results are very early, okay? So we need to be careful here. But the Democratic incumbent here is Chris Pappas. That's a very close race, but look, 28-26. Okay, we just have the very early votes here. So don't jump to conclusions, but this is how we will be watching this, right? This is a white working class district in the state of New Hampshire. Republicans are hoping to pick this up. And if they can pick up that kind of district here, then you think, all right, what districts are like that as you move west? That's how we'll do the calculation throughout the night. This is what is interesting so far, in the sense that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where the polls are now closed, you have 3 Democratic incumbents in competitive races. What you see there is red. Again, it's early. It's early, so we caution everybody, draw no conclusions from this. But this one here is the most Democratic of these districts. Joe Biden won this district by 18 points, right? Hung Kao, the Republican challenger, is 263 votes ahead of Jennifer Wexton. She's the Democratic incumbent.
Only 2% reporting
exactly.
right now.
That's where I was coming. So we're just laying out the stakes for you and the key races for you tonight. We're nowhere near conclusions in these yet. Obviously, you'd rather be ahead. So here's Washington, D.C. Here's Arlington. You come across. This is the Northern Virginia suburbs. 132,000 median income here, well above the national average. This is a very affluent district that Democrats, this college-educated, high-income people, Democrats have traditionally done well recently. Now you're dropping down. A competitive district, Joe Biden only won this one by 7. That's still, Joe Biden won it by 7 points, 6.7 points 2 years ago. 2 years ago, and it's competitive. Yesli Vega, the conservative challenger, 2,776 votes again. Again, only 4%. So we're early on in the night. But if you're the Republicans and you're trying to do your math, there's 1, there's 2. And then the national name you might know here in the third race in Virginia, who is currently behind. 6% of the vote in here. Jen Kagan's the Republican challenger, 1,916 votes ahead to Elaine Luria. We were just in the Northern Virginia suburbs. This is down the Southeast Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, along the coast in the Atlantic Ocean. In this district here, this is Elaine Luria. Biden just carried this one by 1.8. It's Democrat by 1.8. So you see how this is a very competitive district, less competitive district as you go through. If the Republicans can hold these seats in Virginia, and we're early, the Republicans are hoping to get 2 out of the 3. If they get 3 out of the 3, then back to your term.
So there's a Democratic pollster that is a wise man. He told me there are 3 things he's looking at. One of them is these 3 seats, early on, he means, in order to get an idea of how the night's going to go. One is these 3 seats. The other one is New Hampshire Senate. And I don't know, the New Hampshire Senate race.
Yeah, come on over.
So let's go over here.
Let's slide on over.
And let's see how it is. So right now, the New Hampshire Senate race, because that's become competitive.
Right.
Incumbent Democrat Maggie Hassan against former, I think, General Donald Bolduc.
Exactly. An election denier who then, right after he won his primary, tried to switch back and then went back again because the Republican base was getting mad at him. Had a war of words throughout the Republican primary with the state's popular Republican governor. Governor Sununu has made peace with Don Bolduc and has backed him in the election, just as we say this. So this is, look, we're 1,200 votes.
It's
to
nothing.
1,166 votes.
But this is something to keep an eye on.
Right. It's nothing. And also, so the main thing here in New Hampshire, I'm just going to come up here. this corridor right here, from Concord down to Manchester, down to Nashua, that's where the bulk of the population lives. That doesn't mean that every vote doesn't matter if it's close, but the bulk of the population is here. It's more suburban, and it's absolutely key to the Democrats, and we just got some votes in, so let me clear that out. This is the state capital in Concord. Maggie Hassan, again, it says 13%. Again, watch these numbers as our team is trying to calculate how many people turned out on Election Day. What are the early votes?
How did Biden do in Concord?
So we come to 2020, we hit the presidential race.
65.
Biden gets 65%.
So she's exceeding that right now.
Right
it's
now.
Early, very early.
Right now. Former governor, too. That was her office, right? She's a former governor of the state,
right.
And now she's a United States Senator. But let's pull out from 2020. Let's come back to 2022, and you pull out the state right now. That's the House district on the other side.
Right.
And so you come in here, and so where is General Bolduc ahead? He's in Guilford. 45th in terms of population. They call them towns in New Hampshire. They're not counties. Guilford's a great little town. If you're coming through New Hampshire and you're driving up, say, to go to Conway, the North Country, to go skiing, it's a beautiful little town. It's a more Republican town there. Again, 26 votes to 16 votes. We have a long way to go in the count. But to your point about why this race matters, again, it's a 50-50 Senate. This is a Democratic incumbent. In the final days of the campaign, Republicans were thinking 2 months ago, Bolduc didn't have a shot. 2 weeks ago, maybe. 2 days ago, Republicans saying, let's help General Bolduc. Maybe we can get him to the finish line. So this is in the game, the 50-50 Senate. Democrats need to hold this seat. They can't be losing any of the blue seats as they go through it here. So this is what we watch here in the Senate race. As you pull it out here right now, and you see the early results in the Georgia Senate. Senator Warnock still ahead, but it's very early. And very early on, the Democratic candidate was leading in the Florida Senate race. Now the Republican incumbent, Marco Rubio, is leading. And as we get ahead, we're about to get, when it comes to the Senate, we're about to get Ohio. And when it comes to the House, we get many more competitive districts, Jake, in the moments ahead. And again, results coming in Virginia, competitive districts in New Hampshire. We'll have a good sense in the next 30 minutes or so how the House is looking.
All right, John King, polls are closing in 3 more states. 2 of them, Ohio and North Carolina, have high-stakes U.S. Senate races, so we're watching very closely. So here is a key race alert. CNN is saying it is too early to call. Too early to call the Ohio Senate race between J.D. Vance and incumbent Congressman Tim Ryan, both of them squaring off for an open U.S. Senate seat. Too early to call in Ohio. In North Carolina, another open Senate seat from another Republican retiring. That race as well between Sherry Beasley and Congressman Ted Budd. That race also too early to call. The overall balance of power right now in the U.S. Senate, Democrats control 36 U.S. Senate seats. Republicans control 30 U.S. Senate seats. 34 seats remain. Remember, Republicans only need to pick up 1 net Senate seats. Let's go to Boris Sanchez right now, who has a projection when it comes to governor's races. Boris.
Jake, this is our first projection in a governor's race for the evening, and it comes from the state of Ohio. There, incumbent Republican Mike DeWine thread a needle. He was both critical of Donald Trump after the January 6th insurrection and then earned the former president's endorsement after the Republican primary. He defeats the Democratic mayor of Dayton, Ohio, Nan Whaley. Let's get some key race alerts now, beginning with the state of Florida. Last time we checked in, the former Republican governor turned Democratic Congressman Charlie Crist had the lead. Now it belongs to Ron DeSantis, more than 285,000 votes ahead, with 44% of the vote in Florida. Let's get an update now on the state of Georgia. There, still very early, but legendary vote mobilizer Stacey Abrams is ahead. 73,000 votes against incumbent Republican Brian Kemp, only 13% of the vote in there. So we will likely watch that potentially change throughout the night as we turn it over to Casey Young, who has some Senate races.
We sure will. Thank you very much, Boris. And I do want to start actually in Georgia, because we are starting to get some numbers where we can compare things a little bit. So let's take a look at this. Raphael Warnock sitting at 60.1%. But look at that Herschel Walker number, 38.5%. That is different from the Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp, who sits at 42.6%. So again, we want to check with John King on this, but some early signs that perhaps as expected, Herschel Walker's underperforming Brian Kemp, the gubernatorial candidate there. We still expect this race to tighten considerably, only 13% of the vote in here. Let's go now to Florida, where Marco Rubio has taken the lead, probably as many of you expected. He's sitting now at 54% to Val Deming's 45%. Florida's going to count these votes relatively quickly. We've got 45% of the vote in there, but we're obviously going to keep watching it through the night. Let's go north now, though, to New Hampshire, where we are just starting to get votes in to this state, which swings so often with a wave when we see one. Maggie Hassan out to a relatively early lead. Again, there's only a few thousand votes in here, but she's sitting at 59.2%. to Don Bolduc's 39.6%. This is one where Republicans started to take more interest, were encouraged by how things were moving late, but Hassan's team has been feeling good throughout the night so far. We've got 1% of the vote in New Hampshire, Jake.
That's only 1%. Got a lot more votes to count. John King, let's take a look at governor's races right now in the United States.
The one that jumps out at you is Georgia at the moment, in the sense that New Hampshire would be status quo. It's a Republican governor, Chris Sununu. Again, 1% of the vote in. Governor Sununu ahead by 9 points there if you round. Not a surprise, but we'll watch it as we play out through the night. South Carolina, Henry McMaster heavily favored in this race. The early results, pretty close. But again, it's 1% of the vote as you watch it in. But what jumps out at you? Florida, just because we brought it up earlier, when Charlie Crist was ahead, Ron DeSantis has now pulled ahead in the state of Florida. You're seeing some of the rural counties fill in with the red, up to about 48% of the estimated vote. We'll watch this as it plays out. But Governor DeSantis pulling ahead. And we mentioned earlier, Republicans said they could perform in Miami-Dade.
And look at that.
And look at that. They're leading right there. If this stays red, it's fascinating in the governor's race and the Senate race. And there'll be a lot of conversation about this as we head out of 2022 into the 2024 cycle, if this stays red. We're at 60%, or if it turns just blue and it's close, because that has been overwhelmingly Democratic in recent years. But here's the one right now that you want to look at right now. If you're Democrats around watching around the country, this is a rematch, right? Stacey Abrams, as Boris noted, a Democratic organizer, someone in turnout on Joe Biden's list of potential vice presidential candidates. A rematch of 4 years ago, and if you're looking at the vote right now, you would say, wow, with 13% of the vote in, 56% to 43% against an incumbent Republican governor. Right. The question is, though, there's still, number one, there's a lot of votes still to be counted. You see these smaller counties around Georgia, most of them, if you come back to the presidential election, again, Joe Biden won Georgia in 2020, but just barely, just shy of 12,000 votes, but see all that red. And now I just want to come back to 2022. In the governor's race, we have a lot to count in the red rural parts of Georgia. But there's also a question, Jake, when you see an early lead like this, of what votes do we have and what votes are we waiting for? Right. Stacey Abrams beginning to pull away in Fulton County here. But again, Brian Kemp getting 29%. If you come back, let's look at the Senate race for a second here.
Well, that's what I wanted to look at. So
Herschel Walker getting 23% in Fulton County. So we discussed very early on that Governor Kemp was overperforming, or Herschel Walker was underperforming the Republican incumbent governor in the largest basket of votes, 10% of the state population.
So, show me the overall Senate race right now. Warnock, and again, it's only 16%. Right. But Warnock has 386,472 with 59.6% of the vote, and Stacey Abrams is under that.
Yes. Yes. Now, number one, remember, Georgia, there's no one expecting anybody in this race.
No.
Democrat or Republican,
this is
to
early.
be anywhere near that number. But yes, if you look at Warnock versus Abrams, she's 3 percentage points below. She's at 56. He's at 59. And
right, it's about 9. Raphael Warnock, as of now, in actual votes, and again, this is all just coming in right now. It's very early, 16%. Raphael Warnock has about, I believe, about 80,000 more votes than she does, meaning people are voting for Raphael Warnock and then not voting for Stacey Abrams.
Right, and some of those votes clearly going to the governor, because we looked at Fulton County, look at the statewide first. You see 43.4% for Governor Kemp. Let's come to the Senate race, and you see only 39%. So Herschel Walker underperforming the Republican governor. There's one of your questions there. And then let's just come into Fulton County here, and you see Herschel Walker getting 23.3%. Just shy of 65,000 votes. Again, this is overwhelmingly the biggest Democratic area in the state. Then you look at the governor's race, and Brian Kemp is getting 28%.
Even more.
And 79,000 votes. So you have an incumbent governor. There's a lot of, this is Atlanta and the suburbs, right? You say Fulton County, you see the Atlanta, you think it's just the city. It's the city and then the suburbs around it, a growth area, very business area. There are a fair amount of Republicans there, don't get me wrong, but it's the most overwhelmingly Democratic county in the state.
So overall, give me the whole, so it's 16% with Democrats leading in the governor's race and Democrats leading in the Senate race, but it's only 16%. Let's go to David Chalian, if I can, at the Battleground desk. Where are the votes coming in, David? Because obviously this is a very strong early lead for Democrats that I don't think is going to bear out throughout the rest of the night.
Yeah, so one of the things we're going to be looking at all night long where we can is sort of what kind of vote is in. Is it pre-election vote, absentee by mail, early vote, which we know tends to favor Democrats more. They show up more robust numbers that way versus election day vote. So I just want to show you, this is the state of play right now that you and John have been talking about, Jake. Raphael Warnock has 389,000 votes right now in the Georgia Senate race to Herschel Walker's 258,000. 16% of the estimated vote is currently in. But how much of this current vote is that early vote, pre-election vote, where Democrats tend to show up in bigger numbers? Well, right now, 99%, nearly all the vote you're looking at in that wall with John is early vote. And we have estimated that at the end of the day, when all the votes in Georgia are counted, that number is going to come down to 61%. We've estimated that 61% of the overall vote will have been early vote, which we know broke records in Georgia. But right now, 99% is. So look at the governor's race. It's a similar story. Stacey Abrams currently with 367,000 votes to Brian Kemp's 288,000 votes. Again, this is 16% of the estimated vote that's in, but all of it, nearly 99%, is the pre-election vote, Jake. It's the early vote. We think that is only going to make up 61% of the overall vote when it is fully tallied, which means a lot more election day vote is going to come in as a share of the vote, and that could, of course, benefit Brian Kemp, benefit Herschel Walker, since Republicans tend to show up in greater proportion on Election Day in person.
Indeed. Interesting, David Chalian. And I don't suppose we have the technology to know what percentage of the early vote Joe Biden won over Donald Trump in 2020.
Those numbers are available to us. They're not in here, but it's disproportionately. I mean, remember, like in Philadelphia, it was over 80%.
But I'm wondering, where Raphael Warnock was, because if this is basically,
how big of a lead does he have?
This is basically, we say it's a 16%, but this is basically just the early vote.
It's the early vote.
This is the early vote, and I'm wondering what that matches. If somebody backstage could figure out.
Overwhelmingly and disproportionately a Democratic vote.
So let's go ahead north if we can, because North Carolina, there's a big Senate race there, and I'm wondering what's going on there.
We have our first results in here, and again, I'm going to suspect it's the very same dynamic, and David can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But again, Sherry Beasley ran a remarkably competitive campaign, We talked earlier about Democrats saying maybe we should have helped her out a little bit earlier. A Republican member of the House, Ted Budd, had Donald Trump's endorsement in the primary, trying to move up to statewide office. Sherry Beasley, former state Supreme Court Chief Justice, 60% to 40% if you round everybody up. You see where the blue is. Well, it's blue where it should be blue if a Democrat's going to be competitive. That is Wake County, the second largest county in the state. You see right here, 68% to 30%, 54% of the vote in. African-American population, college-educated population. The number one county is here, Mecklenburg. That's almost 11% of the state population, 70% to 29%, or 69. 29. She's not right. Can't round that up just yet. This is what you want to do if you're the Democrat, right? Joe Biden won this county by 35 points. She's winning it by 39 points, almost 40 points. Yeah, even 40. It is 40 points. But again, it's a 50% here, and I suspect we're looking at the early vote as well. David can, if I'm wrong, David will jump in. So you look at the map when you fill it out. Again, this is going to be a competitive race. This will be a competitive race, but we're at 33%. And I'm just going to note again, you come to some of these rural counties. I'm just going to move up here to the Virginia border. Rockingham County is 31 in terms of vote count, but Donald Trump won this county by 32 points. Yeah. We have no votes yet, so Republicans will run it up in places like that.
Let's go to David to tell us where this vote's coming from. David's at the battleground desk, of course. David, is this early vote?
It is. You've identified this correctly. So this may be an important factor here when you're looking at these vote totals. Sherry Beasley right now, 784,000 votes in the vote count to Ted Budd's 527,000. We think about a third of the overall vote is already in, but how much of this is pre-election vote that is in this total? 100% of it, guys. And we think at the end of the day, only 55% of the North Carolina vote is going to be early vote, pre-election vote. So right now, it is this heavily inflated Beasley vote, Jake, because 100% of what you see, basically 100% of what you see, is this pre-election and early vote where Democrats tend to participate that way. We have barely any election day vote, which is likely going to be a Ted Budd big category of vote.
And let's remind people also, John, I mean, North Carolina can be competitive. It has a Democratic governor. It has a Democratic attorney general. Joe Biden lost, but narrowly. What was his margin in 2020?
Let's come to the presidential race in 2020. And you look at the race.
Yeah, I mean, he lost, but he lost by 74,000 votes.
Obama won it. We go back in time. Let's do the history because
he won it once and won it.
It's actually a fascinating history. Obama just won it over John McCain. Historic African-American turnout in the first Obama election of 2008. It was history in the making, and African-American voters turned out in huge numbers. And then Democrats thought, North Carolina, Sun Belt state, changing population, more college-educated voters. Democrats start making inroads in the traditionally Republican suburbs around Raleigh, around Charlotte.
And they had a Democratic senator there for a while.
Democratic senator, and you come back, Kay Hagan in that year. Kay Hagan was the last Democratic senator elected in that year with Barack Obama. So then look at this, Mitt Romney pulls it out just barely. It's a close election, right? It's 2 points in 2012. Democrats keep thinking, but then you get it. You move forward to 2016. Hillary Clinton says, I can do it. I can come to North Carolina. Not so much. The Gary Johnson campaign, you could say the third-party candidate matters. Trump getting just over 50% there. And then, so you see the margin there. And then again, the Biden campaign thought maybe we can get it. Not the case, but very closely.
Let me walk you to the House over here, John, just because lots going on here, too, with the votes coming in Georgia, in North Carolina, and elsewhere. And it looks like no changes in Virginia.
Yeah, no changes. As you look here, again, these numbers can be somewhat misleading, so we're going to try to describe them throughout the night, right? You're looking at, this is all of the House races that are reporting results so far, and you have Democrats leading in 50. Democrats leading in 32, Republicans leading in 50. As Jake laid out earlier, we've identified 82 competitive races with our partner Inside Elections. Republicans are leading in 7 of those competitive seats right now, not called yet. Democrats leading in 5 of them. That's not good enough for the Democrats. The Democrats have to disproportionately win the competitive seats if they have any chance of defying history. Republicans need a net gain of 5. The average in a president's first midterm since Ronald Reagan is 30. So Joe Biden has to defy that history. History says Republicans will get somewhere in the ballpark of 30. The Democrats have to keep it to 5. So what are we looking at right now? Again, you start in the Northeast, 2 Democratic seats in New Hampshire. You see right now the Democrat leading, Ann Custer, leading in this seat right here, 51 to 48. But again, 1% of the vote in here. And you don't see any color in the first district, Democratic incumbent Chris Pappas, because there are no votes counted yet as we come in. But then, Jake, you move down. You made the point about Virginia. I just want to pop it up real quick. There are 3 competitive districts here. Let me bring them up. 3 competitive seats, all Democratic incumbents at the moment, Republicans leading in all 3 of them.
In all 3 of them, absolutely. And we are closing in on one of the most critical hours of this election night with the biggest round of poll closings. At 8 p.m. Eastern, voting ends in Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Florida, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Tennessee. There's a lot on the line in the hour ahead as both parties aim for the 218 seats needed to win control of the U.S. House of Representatives. A whopping 161 House seats are at stake in this next round of poll closing. 25 of those races, 25 are competitive. That includes contests in Michigan and Texas, where voting is about to end in most of those states' congressional districts. On to the Senate. We're standing by for the first results from one of the most consequential races tonight in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, the Democrat, is hoping to flip an open Senate seat from red to blue. He's in a heated contest with his Republican opponent, former TV doctor Mehmet Oz. Fetterman's recovery from a stroke in May has been a prominent issue in this race. In New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan is trying to beat back a strong challenge from retired General Don Bolduc, who's gone back and forth on his statements about who won the 2020 election. In the Florida race for U.S. Senate, Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings has an uphill climb in the increasingly red-trending state. Demings is challenging the incumbent Republican 2-term senator and former presidential candidate Marco Rubio. Turning to the key governor's races now, in Pennsylvania, State Attorney General Josh Shapiro is aiming to keep the governor's office in Democratic hands. His Republican opponent, State Senator Doug Mastriano, was a central figure in Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Pennsylvania. And in Florida, the former Democratic congressman and former Republican Charlie Crist is challenging the state's high-profile Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis, of course, a potential 2024 presidential candidate. With the end of voting just minutes away, let's check in on that key Senate race in Pennsylvania. Jessica Dean is at the headquarters of Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman. And Jessica, how does the Fetterman campaign see the night progressing?
Well, Jake, they are well aware that these numbers from Philadelphia, which of course is a Democratic stronghold, and to win statewide as a Democrat, you really got to run up the numbers there in Philadelphia. They're aware those numbers are going to come in pretty slowly. So with that in mind, they have put out a memo to everyone saying, buckle up, this is going to take some time. They also are going to keep an eye on some bellwether counties across the Commonwealth that they do think they'll get some data from earlier on that will kind of give them an indication of where they're going, how they stack up to what Biden did in 2020, for example. In the meantime, I've also been talking to them about how they feel about how they closed out the last 5 days of this campaign. And in talking to campaign sources, they really believe they did this as strongly as they possibly could. And several of them pointed to the Oprah Winfrey endorsement. That came late Thursday and then really played heavily on television here in local markets on Friday. They think that that targeted a key demographic for them. That's suburban women who can be quite independent in their voting. And they think they really need a strong turnout from those suburban women. They think that Oprah Winfrey could be the key there. Jake, celebrity endorsements often don't move the needle, but in this case, she of course made his opponent Mehmet Oz a household name. So her endorsement was quite personal. Jake?
Yeah, interesting. The Fetterman campaign will no doubt be looking to Harrisburg and Scranton to see if they overperform how Joe Biden did there. Let's go to Kate Baldwin now. She's at Oz campaign headquarters in Newtown outside Philadelphia. What's the feeling there? What are you hearing from the Oz campaign people?
Jake, the Oz campaign is being very careful to not make predictions on how the evening is going at this point. For one very clear reason, as you well know, the polls haven't even closed yet. But if they do win, the Oz campaign is attributing the momentum, will attribute the momentum pushing them across the finish line to their final message. It's this contrast that Mehmet Oz has been consistently hammering away at in the final days, which is bringing balance to Washington and rejecting extremism on both sides, which is how he puts it, which, of course, that's a tricky balancing act that Oz has been trying to pull off. Look no further than just this past weekend. Saturday, he was on stage with former President Donald Trump. The very next day, he had Senator Susan Collins stumping with him in Philadelphia. Collins, a moderate senator who has made very clear she has created distance and distanced herself from the former president, even voting to impeach him following the insurrection. This tricky balancing act was also very clearly on display in his final rally in the Philadelphia suburbs just last night. Mehmet Oz reminding the crowd that he is not a politician, he is a surgeon, saying in the operating room, you cannot divide, you have to unite to fix the problem, saying extreme ideas hurt people in the operating room. Again, we'll see if the balancing act worked.
All right, Kate Baldwin in Newtown, Pennsylvania, outside Philly. Let's go back to David Chalian now, who has some early exit polls from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So what is on the minds of my friends in Pennsylvania?
Yes, your brethren in Pennsylvania, Jake. Well, it's so interesting because you can really see in these numbers the way in which these candidates have presented themselves, whose views are too extreme, right? Each candidate's been trying to paint the other one as extreme. 42% of Pennsylvania's voters say only Fetterman is too extreme. Guess what? An equal amount, 42% say only Oz is too extreme. 5% say both, 8% say neither. Which candidate quality mattered most to you? I find this really interesting because we saw something similar in Georgia. This is not an empathy or experience election. This is a character election. 36% of Pennsylvania voters looking for a candidate who shares my values. 33% looking for a candidate who has honesty and integrity. Only 19% cares about people like me. 8% looking for the candidate with the right experience. Fetterman's health, that was an issue we asked about, of course, as he's recovering from a stroke. Is it good enough to represent the state effectively? 49% of Pennsylvania voters in this election say yes. A roughly equal amount, the other half, say no. His health is not good enough to represent them effectively. And then we asked about the Achilles heel on the Oz side that the Fetterman campaign is trying to use throughout the season. Has Oz lived in the state long enough to represent it effectively? Interestingly here, a majority of voters in Pennsylvania, 55% say no. Oz has not lived in the Commonwealth long enough. 43%, Dana, say yes. Oz has lived in Pennsylvania long enough.
So interesting, David, especially when you're talking about the 2022 midterm. There's so much of a national notion of how this is all going to go. But in Pennsylvania, so much of it is personality driven. These are two very distinct personalities.
Absolutely. And the fact that being a carpetbagger, being from New Jersey, is more of a burden to Oz than the stroke and what we saw in a very shaky debate performance is to Fetterman, is surprising and telling to me. And the only other point I'd make is Pennsylvania, this is so key to the Democrats. If they can flip this seat, then they can afford to lose one and hold on to a 50-50 Senate. If they don't flip this seat or other ones, they can't afford to lose a single state.
Right, this is the most important potential pickup, the only real one.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the one that they are, maybe they're not the most nervous about, but they're extremely nervous about this seat. It's hard to know what direction this was going in. A lot of Republicans after this Fetterman debate with Oz were saying that was the end of the Fetterman campaign. Well, if these exits are to be believed, voters are basically saying, you know, it's about a wash. I'm really surprised by the carpetbagger number. I'm not going to lie. That argument from Fetterman seemed to live very much online, live in the memes, but these exit polls seem to suggest that voters took it or are taking it somewhat seriously. I still don't think, though, that we know whether or not any of this matters more than the overall environment in this midterm.
So Pennsylvania, as we were saying, the polls close at the top of the hour. In Ohio, the polls have already closed, and we're starting to get actual, real numbers in, and they're really interesting in that in the Senate race now, we should say only 13% of the vote is in, but right now, early on, Tim Ryan, the Democrat, is very, very far ahead. Again, very, very early. But it begs the question, and this is a conversation that has been had in Washington, particularly among Democrats, is whether or not more focus should have been on a race like this, where Tim Ryan, a sitting member of Congress, who has a campaign that is tailor-made for Ohio, kind of old school Democrats, working class union Democrats, trying to get them out, whether there should have been more focus and help for him.
Well, first of all, one of the reasons Ohio is so important is if you need to flip a seat to ensure that you've got a margin for error, if they don't take Pennsylvania, their two best chances, Democrats, are Ohio and North Carolina. The question is both sides, both candidates, Vance and Ryan, have been competing to be the working class hero. It'll be interesting to see who the Ohio voters decide is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I absolutely think, though, that Tim Ryan used the lack of investment to his great advantage. He ran on being abandoned by Washington, being independent from people back here in D.C., and that was actually, I mean, frankly, you could argue that is the key to why this race might be competitive. We'll see how it turns out, but I mean, I think hindsight is 20/20. Tim Ryan made the best of that situation, I think, from a messaging perspective.
Yeah, and it's also a whole larger conversation about the change of the Democratic Party and its kind of evaporation from the middle of the country. Jake and John?
Polls are going to close in 16 states in about 4.5 minutes, but until then, let's chew over some of the results we're getting from the House of Representatives races. John.
Beginning to fill in the map, 435 in all. It's going to take us a while to fill in the map, and it's going to take us days, maybe longer, to count all the final results. But leading the vote, this is leading the vote, not called races, right? Republicans leading in 55, Democrats in 42. More importantly, as Jake's been laying out throughout the night, the 82 competitive races we've identified, Democrats leading in 8, Republicans leading in 6. That would sound on the surface like good news. Democrats
that sounds like good news for Democrats as of now, but, right.
But they have to win. They're defending 60 of the 80, essentially. 57 have Democratic incumbents. So let's pop it up and just zero in on the competitive races. A couple of interesting things. Number one, we talked earlier, last time we talked about this, all 3 House Democrats in Virginia were losing. One of them in the most Democratic district, Jennifer Wexton, has now pulled ahead. About 57% of the estimated vote. She's 7,544 votes ahead of a Republican challenger. Hung Cow, this has been a nasty race. Living here, you watch the ads in the Washington TV. It's been shocking both ways when you look at the advertisements. But this is the most Democratic district.
Right.
3 in Virginia.
The least likely to fall to the
Joe Biden
Republican.
carried this district by 18 points.
Right.
Imagine it even being competitive. Makes it a big deal. But Wexton ahead for now. We'll see as we keep counting votes there. Then you move just south of that. Again, suburbia, suburbs, into exurbia.
That's a lot of vote, almost half the vote in, and Spanberger is behind by 20,000
About
votes.
half the vote here. It'd be interesting to talk to our people on the ground and our battleground desk about which votes are being counted here. But certainly, you'd rather be ahead than behind at any point in the count. But we need to be careful in every state. About
And there are some big
context.
population areas in that district that we don't know if they've weighed in.
That again, this is a Democrat plus just shy of 7. So Joe Biden won the district we just showed you here by 18 points. You start moving out into Exurbia. It's a 7-point Democratic district. Spanberger losing at the moment. Then you come down here, and this is a gap here. Again, we need more votes. It's 31%, but this one is shaping up as a bigger race in a district that's essentially an even district. Joe Biden wins it by just shy of 2 points. And remember, this is according to the new lines, right, of how the districts have been drawn. So, but if you think of the simplest way to look at the math is Republicans need a net gain of 5. Right. And they're leading in 2 in Virginia. It's not over. We're still counting votes. But you're leading in 2 there. If you pull out to look at some of the others, this is a fascinating race here. Marcy Kaptur, one of the longest-serving House Democrats, they redrew her district. This is me doing this roughly. But her district used to stop about here and stretch this way over toward Cleveland a little bit, right?
They made it more Republican.
This is what they've done. So now they've taken it away, and they put her out here. Let me show you the presidential race in 2020 in Ohio. See, this is Marcy Kaptur's old district here, and they drew the rest of it in right there. So let's come back to 2022 and see how she's doing, because this is a fascinating race. Number one, can a Democratic incumbent hold on in a much more Republican district in a tougher year, running against J.R. Majewski, who is a Trump acolyte, a January 6th supporter, and somebody in this district here. Again, we're only at 1% here. We're only at 1%, and as you see the Ohio map, I'm going to pull out and show you the House races, then I'm going to walk over here and show you the governor's race. We are talking about 100% of early vote, and early vote tends to be disproportionately Democratic. Again, you always rather be ahead than behind, but you see another House race down here. This is Cincinnati and the suburbs to the north. The Republican incumbent is Steve Chabot. He's losing at the moment. This is another competitive seat. Democrats would love to pick up this seat to offset losses elsewhere, but I want to emphasize this is 100% early vote. Tends to be disproportionately Democrat. So we look at it now. We'll keep it on our radar screen, but you have to be cautious. Don't draw any conclusions looking at that map. Just quickly, moving over here to the United States Senate, I just want to make the point because it's the very same dynamic. Dana was just talking about this race. The Democratic candidate, Tim Ryan, is out to an early lead here in the state of Ohio, but this is, again, 100%, at least as of 2 minutes ago, 100% early vote. You'd rather be ahead than behind, but we're waiting. You see the middle part here that's gray, not filled in. That is Trump country in Ohio. Jake, we'll watch the race as we go, and we'll get more votes as we move through the hour.
All right, John King, we are just moments away from the biggest round of poll closings this evening, including that critical Senate contest in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that could go a long way toward deciding control of the U.S. Senate. As of right now, CNN is projecting that Senator Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida, will be reelected, defeating Congresswoman Val Demings. In Alabama, CNN is projecting that Katie Britt will win her Senate seat, defeating her opponent. She is a former staffer for the retiring Republican Dick Shelby in that Alabama Senate seat, so that's a hold for Republicans. In Oklahoma, CNN is projecting that incumbent Senator James Lankford will win. In the special election in Oklahoma, CNN is projecting that Mark Wayne Mullen will be elected, defeating Kendra Horn. And then in Kentucky, CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Rand Paul will be reelected. The big Senate race in Pennsylvania, CNN is declaring to be too early to call, and the big Senate race that's between Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman and TV's Dr. Mehmet Oz, too early to call as of right now. And in New Hampshire, a competitive race between incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan against retired General Don Bolduc. Again, too early to call. Let's look at the map in general right now. Right now, we have no projection in Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, and then, as I said, New Hampshire and Pennsylvania. Too early to call right now. The overall balance of power in the U.S. Senate, Democrats have 36 of the Senate seats. Republicans have 35 Senate seats. There are 29 seats remaining. That's what the rest of the night is about. Remember, Republicans only need to pick up one net seat from the Democrats in order to regain control of the Senate. But we have governor's races for you as well, and Boris Sanchez has those.
Jake, we have two projections to bring you from the South, including a major win for Republicans in the state of Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis winning re-election by a considerable margin. Right now, DeSantis is up nearly 16 percentage points. That's notable because Donald Trump won the state of Florida in 2020 by about 3.5 points. DeSantis, of course, widely speculated that he may run for president. Trump certainly thinks so with some of his recent attacks on the Florida governor, who earns a return trip to the governor's mansion in the Sunshine State. We also have a projection to bring you from Ruby Red, Alabama, a state that Donald Trump won, earning about 60% of the vote in 2020. There, incumbent Republican Kay Ivey, a staunch Trump supporter, she defeats rehabilitative therapist Yolanda Flowers to win another 4 years in Alabama. We also have a key race alert to bring you now. From the Peach State in Georgia, right now, Democratic activist Stacey Abrams, 44, it just changed, 38,000 votes ahead of incumbent Republican Brian Kemp. The lead thinning there with the last update, still only 31% of the vote in Georgia. We'll see where that winds up as the night moves along. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. States where polls have closed, but where it is too early for CNN to make a projection. We're talking about Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, as well as Rhode Island and the volunteer state of Tennessee. Let's turn it over now to Casey Hunt, who has some updates for us from Senate races. Casey.
Yeah, and Boris, let's start in Georgia because you just gave us an update on the governor's race there. Let's compare it to where things stand in the Senate race. Raphael Warnock up at 54.5% to Herschel Walker's 43.9%. So that spread between where the Republican Governor Kemp is at 48.2% right now has widened. Walker is just at 43.9%. That has to be giving some of the Democrats I've been talking to throughout the night a little bit of relief. We got, though, a third of the vote in here. We do, of course, expect this to be one of the tightest on the map. Let's take a look at North Carolina, where the Democrat Sherry Beasley has an early lead over Republican Ted Budd. Remember, this is retiring Republican Senator Richard Burr's seat, so a Democratic win here would represent a pickup for them, although we do expect this race to tighten through the evening. We have about 46% of the vote in North Carolina right now. Now let's go check in on Ohio, where the Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan is out to an early lead of 58.1% to the Republican J.D. Vance's 41.8%. With a spread that wide, we really do have to ask where those votes are coming from. We've only got about 20% of the vote in Ohio right now. And let's also check in on New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan is at 64.1% to the Republican Don Baldock's 35.4%. She's about 13,000 votes ahead, so that tells you where we are in the vote count. We're not very far in. We are at 8%, but you'd rather be Maggie Hassan at this hour than Don Baldock, Jake.
All right, Casey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. John King getting us up to speed on the Senate right now. Where are we? Because we have races, we have votes coming in at least 3 competitive races, New Hampshire and Georgia and perhaps North Carolina.
All right, so Georgia and New Hampshire would be holds, Democratic incumbents right now. I'll get into the Georgia vote complications in a minute. Pennsylvania, the Democrat, we have in the very, very early results leading, but we got a long way to go here. This would be.
It's all from Pittsburgh.
Right, it's all from Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, heavy Democratic area, early vote. So it's a step away from that. But again, so if you're watching at home and you're seeing the Senate map, you know, Democrats very much want to pick up that seat currently held by a Republican. Democrats want to pick up Ohio, currently held by a Republican, and North Carolina, currently held by a Republican. So you look at the map and you think, wow, look at that. I just want to go back to
very early
the 2020 presidential election, where at this, this time of night, Joe Biden was leading in Ohio, and Tim Ryan is leading now. This is overwhelmingly early vote. Overwhelmingly early vote. So you see it, every vote counts. And so, with the Democrats, the early vote, I say, I don't mean it to be dismissive. If you're the Democrat, you need to run it up in the early vote and build that margin for when the election day vote comes in, especially in these small rural counties that tend to be overwhelmingly Republican. So I'm not being dismissive of it, but I just, for the context, we have a lot of votes to come in. This has tightened up a little tiny bit, but again, this is early vote here. But again, Sherry Beasley,
you ran a great race.
We're watching the map to see if we get surprised, right? Keep an open mind about things. So then you come down to Georgia. This is, a landmark Senate race right now. Senator Warnock at the moment 10 points ahead in this race. I'm going to point you to this number. It doesn't seem like it matters now. Georgia law, 50% or else a runoff in December. So you need 50% plus one vote, if you will. Warnock's above that right now, but we're only about a third of the vote counted here. Watch the Libertarian number as we get later into the night. Is it big enough, to pull the two leading candidates under 50%? We'll have to watch. That's one of the calculations. At the moment, Senator Warnock is above 50. Just want to check over the governor's race because we're watching this ticket splitting dynamic all night long. So the Democrat leading, it's early. This is predominantly early vote, as David Challian explained to us earlier. But Raphael Warnock at 54.4%, 768,000 votes. You flip to the governor's race.
And look at that.
That's 43,000 votes, rough math. Stacey Abrams is ahead, but 43,000 fewer votes than the Democratic candidate for Senate, and Brian Kemp, the Republican candidate for governor. That gap has been closing.
But look, and one of the reasons that we're looking about this is because the governor's race, even though we're 35% in, Stacey Abrams is in the lead. It's regarded as much less competitive. It's much more likely, we believe, that Brian Kemp will win, whereas the Senate race is very competitive, and we really don't have any idea who's going to win that.
Right.
Brian Kemp has 685,000 votes. Herschel Walker, at the same time, that Herschel Walker has 614,000.
Right.
So that means that there are 620,000.
Yeah,
but
it's moving as you speak a little bit as votes. So you see it filling in, but you have the rough gap.
It does seem the conclusion is inevitable that there are people who are voting for Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, and then are crossing the aisle, or maybe they were already there, and voting for Raphael Warnock, the Democratic senator, which is an interesting state of play and also gives you an idea of the relative strength of Raphael Warnock. Doesn't mean he's going to win, but it does mean he's doing what he needs to do in that regard.
And the place you will see that, most predominantly is in the suburbs around Atlanta, which have become more Democratic in recent years. This is why Joe Biden carried the state. But if you look here, this is Cobb County. It's the third largest, little over 7% of the state population, right? So you see Senator Warnock running at 59%.
59, 38.
Herschel Walker at 39, if you round that up.
This is a Cobb.
And then you look at the governor's race. You look at the governor's race, and Stacey Abrams is at 55, right? She's down. She is underperforming the Senator Warnock.
Right.
And there you have Brian Kemp, who is
44.
overperforming Herschel Walker, or Herschel Walker is underperforming. He's the incumbent governor, so we should use him as the standard. Herschel Walker is underperforming the incumbent governor in the suburbs. And again, Republicans don't have to win the suburbs; they need to narrow the Democrats' margins.
So can I ask that? Can I see how Joe Biden did in Cobb County in 2020?
Sure, Joe Biden, Cobb County.
That's
Joe
Biden.
The Senate race. Hold on, we got to come to the presidential race now.
He did 56. So this is another interesting comparison, and the reason I say this is because Joe Biden won Georgia very narrowly, 11,000 plus votes. Joe Biden had 56% of the vote in Cobb County. Raphael Warnock has 59% of the vote in Cobb County. So Raphael Warnock is overperforming, at least as of right now, again, just a snapshot, overperforming what Joe Biden did, and Joe Biden won. So that's another interesting comparison.
It is. I just want to add one little cautionary note to that, though, as we come through it.
Well, it's all early, is the other thing. All this is early. We're just trying to read the tea leaves.
Right. So here we have a sense of the outstanding vote, right, where we're still waiting for votes. And you see the size of the circles, right? The size of the circles is the biggest percentage of outstanding vote. If it's blue, that means the Democrat is leading in that area. You see the circles down here. That means we're outstanding vote. It's larger over here. That means the Republican is leading in that area. And so you come right in here. You come in central Atlanta. You come in here. There's Cobb County. Right, so we've still got a sizable percentage of the vote out. But Jake's making the important point about the fight for the margins in the suburbs. It is unlikely the Republicans will carry Cobb County. The question is, can you be competitive enough in Cobb County? Can you be competitive enough in Atlanta and the suburbs around it? That's Fulton County. Then you come over here to Gwinnett County, and you come down here where we have no votes yet. See the gray? That means we have no votes yet into Cobb County. So that's the whole competition. The Democratic base is here. The suburbs decide statewide races. There are other suburbs as well. As you pull out, you can come down around Columbus. You can go up here around Augusta, over here around Savannah. You see again, this is a Democrat leading here in Chatham County, which is Savannah, but we still got a lot of the vote out there. They say about 49%. Again, you see, Senator, let's just test it again over here in this part of the state, a very different part of the state, over here on the seacoast. Senator Warnock at 66%, Herschel Walker at 33%. You take a peek here at the governor's race. Again, Stacey Abrams about 4 points, a little shy of that below, percentage points below. She's underperforming Senator Warnock. And you look at Governor Kemp at 37% right there. You come back to the Senate race, Herschel Walker by just shy of 5 points, underperforming the Republican governor. So what you're looking for here is ticket splitting in the sense. We saw in Ohio, we've already projected Mike DeWine, the Republican governor, winning. Does he help J.D. Vance? Is there a lot of ticket splitting that helps Tim Ryan. We're going to watch that play out in a number of states as we come out. Let me turn this off now and just come back to what we're seeing live in the field, in the race. Senator Warnock is ahead, but we're at 36%. Very important to note early in the night here, we have to keep counting. Let's come out and just take a quick look at some of the other Senate races. And again, let's check in Ohio again just to see the percentage, right? This is a state where Tim Ryan has run a very competitive race. He is not going to win Ohio with 57% of the vote, even if he holds that lead and wins. It's just too competitive a state. That tells you disproportionately early vote that we're looking at. We're waiting for Election Day votes, only 23% reporting there. One of the key races. Again, let's just check in to see in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A few more votes in, again, coming in Democratic areas. The first votes came in Allegheny County. Remember, Braddock, Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman was the mayor, is right out in this area. 84% right there, but a long way to go, Jake, in your home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thanks, John King. And we have some projections for you now. 3 projections for Republicans running for the House of Representatives. In Florida, Trump-endorsed Army veteran Corey Mills, CNN is projecting, has won a seat representing Seminole County. Republican Air Force veteran Ana Paulina Luna, CNN is projecting, has won a red-leaning district that includes St. Petersburg. She formerly worked at Turning Point USA, a pro-Trump youth organization. In Florida, Republican Laurel Lee is the winner in a newly drawn Tampa area district. She is a former Florida Secretary of State. Let's look at the balance of power now in the House of Representatives. 19 Democrats have been elected, 45 Republicans, including 3 pickups. There are still 371 seats remaining. Needing to control, of course, is 218. What's the state of play in the 83 competitive U.S. House seats that we've isolated? Well, Republicans need to win 27 of them. That's down from 30, so they're on their way. Democrats need to win 53 of those competitive seats. That's the same number we had before. So we do have right now Republicans having some momentum. It's very early. I don't want anyone to draw any conclusions, but these are 3 Republican projected wins in the House of Representatives. And so if you're sitting at the National Republican Congressional Committee, you're thinking, this is what we need to do.
We're doing what we need to do, and you're winning in the districts where they're competitive, but districts that are competitive but lean a little bit Republican, right? That's the challenge. Is there anything Democrats can do to make inroads in a Republican area in a year when you know, we talked about the Loria district, the Spanberger district in Virginia, Republicans are making inroads in Democratic areas, so the only way to counter that is to take some from them, if you will. So you just talk about the district here, the Ana Luna district that we've now projected, right? This is a district that Donald Trump carried, according to the new lines,
right,
would have carried in these new lines by 6.6 percentage points. So it's a Republican district, not by a ton. You know, but you have to keep it. Republicans kept it. That's the challenge, to keep your math. Then you move over here, the district here. This is a much more competitive district.
This is a new seat.
This is a new seat. Had these lines been in place in 2020, Donald Trump would have won this district by 3 points. So that's a much more competitive district, right? And Republicans hold it. That's the challenge, right? You have to pick up where you can. So you come back out again, and you come across, you're going across the swath of I-5 here as you go across the state of Florida. Corey Mills winning over here. Again, Republican 5.5, right? So a Republican district, not a comfortably Republican district. So you're watching, those are 3 of the 4 competitive races in Florida. The other one, again, we talked about this earlier in the context of the governor's race and the Senate race. Maria Elvira Salazar won this. This is a former Democratic district. The lines have been redrawn. And these lines, this would have been, look at that, 0.6, right? This is a 50-50 district. Donald Trump would have carried this, according to these lines, by less than 1 percentage point. And you have the Republican incumbent who's leading at the moment. I don't believe we have called this race yet, but you see this here. Again, can Republicans hold? The way to get the majority, if you're in the minority, is hold what you got and take some away. And if you look at these districts here in the state of Florida, Republicans are doing exactly what they needed to do. So let's check back in. You hold what you got, then you're looking to take some away. We just told you the Republican in Florida winning that district was about 6% Republican. Well, you come here to a district that is 6.7% Democratic, right? So Republicans are holding the districts where they have an advantage in the 6-7 point range. The question is, can Democrats do the same? At the moment, in this district in Virginia, again, we're not there yet. We're waiting for more votes, but the Democratic incumbent is losing by 9 points there.
And that's with 77% of the vote in. That's a lot of vote.
It's a lot of vote. The challenge is, what's the outstanding vote? A, where is it? And B, what kind of it, right? So you come back in here and you want to look at live outstanding vote. I have to go over here. I can't get to it on this. Oh, I'm in the competitive races. That's why I can't get to it. So let's come out here and we look. and we come on in, we go through the counties in the district. Wow, that's a lot of red in this county as you come through it here. You come right up here. You have Stafford County here, Democrat +2. Vega is winning. You come over, oop, that's.
I think you went out of the district.
Yeah, it's acting up on me there. You go across the county lines here.
There you go.
So you come down back in here, and you come here. Culpeper County, this is a Republican area, 20 points. She's winning by 20 points.
Right.
You just move around the district and you come through. So we're going to have to watch as this one plays out. I want to come back so I don't make anybody dizzy going through the counties here. Come all the way back out to the district here. You see a little, every now and then you get a little glitch in the technology.
Can you go back to Spanberger's district for 1 second?
Sure, let me come out of this.
But I'm curious about.
We come out of this, we come back to here.
Yeah, give us the county view.
See if it doesn't glitch on you.
Okay. What's that little spot of blue there? What's that?
Let's pop it up and see. There you go. It's Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Okay. So that's the major city in the area.
Right.
And there's another blue spot north of
so
that.
You come on out and you come up here. You move on out and you come up. Now you're moving much more closer. Prince William County, you're getting closer to D.C. This is a 32.
But it's only 26% in Prince William County, which is a D plus 32.
Yes, plus 30. So she's running. There you go. There's your 30 points right there. A little below 32, but you want to be about 30 points ahead here. And so, yeah, 26%. Again, you're talking about what's outstanding.
Well, that's important. If you're in Spanberger's camp right now, you're thinking, well, we still got 74% of the vote in Prince William.
Closer in Democratic suburbs, you've still got a lot of votes to come in, which is why you don't call the race and you bring it out. This one's a little unstable at the moment as you come through it. We can switch over here if it keeps doing that. But yes, so there's outstanding votes. And so if you're in the Spanberger headquarters right now, you're calling your precinct captains out there to try to figure out where they are. And then we match it out through the night and see where.
Right, because because the precinct captains also have it neighborhood by neighborhood.
Right.
Precinct by precinct.
They know. I'm going to come out of these because that's when you overdo it. That's when it gets a little glitchy when you put too much data. Yes, the precinct captains know exactly where these are. I just want to come back out to it this way and try to come back at it. So 77% of the vote as you come through it. Let's just look at the.
And one of the reasons why we're focusing so much on Congresswoman Spanberger's district is that it really is going to be, I think, a bellwether for what happens tonight. It is, of the 3 congressional districts, it's the one that we don't know really what's going to happen. And well, we don't know in any of them.
It's in the middle. It's in the middle is the best way to put it in the sense that the Wexton district
is
above
generally favored.
18-point Democratic district, right? And you see Hunkow winning in some of the counties here too, further out, as you move out a little bit. We're still waiting for votes here. But you have an 18-point Democratic district there where the Democrat is leading. Then you come down here, and it's a 7-point Democratic district, and you have the Republican ahead. Again, Florida, the Republicans are holding their +7 district here in Virginia at the moment. They're on defense. And then you come down to the third one down here, which is the true swing district, Democrat 1+8, and you have the Republican candidate comfortably ahead at the moment in that district. Still more votes to count.
Of the 3 Democratic congresswomen from Virginia, Luria is in the toughest battle.
Yes, without a doubt.
Then Spanberger, then Wexton. So Spanberger, the reason to look at her seat is because if it falls, it's probably going to be a lot of other Democrats that are going to have bad nights. Can we take a look at the Senate?
Yes.
If that's okay with you?
Yes, to your point about that one, if only the Luria district fell in Virginia, you're likely to, and districts like that followed it, you're likely to get a Republican majority because they only need a net of 5, but a smaller majority.
Right.
If the Luria districts and the Spanberger districts, meaning districts like that as you move across the country, keep falling, that's how Republicans build a majority. And that's what we're going to watch. Now we're going to come back here to the Senate.
What do we got going in Pennsylvania right now?
You'll notice, people at home, that Mr. Tapper is a fan of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's all right. That's home. Home is where.
Well, it is perhaps the most competitive Senate race, either this one or Georgia. Yeah.
Or when we get Western Nevada, we can have a competition about it. But these are the 50-50 very competitive Senate races. And again, this is we have to be very careful because we're looking at overwhelmingly Democratic areas reporting votes so far. Allegheny, Pittsburgh, and the suburbs around it. John Fetterman is the lieutenant governor. He's from Braddock, which is out west here, very well known. Plus, it's a huge Democratic area to begin with. Then you move over here. This is suburbs of Cumberland County, just outside of the capital, Harrisburg.
It's R+10 district, though.
It's R+10, but which is why you're most likely looking at an early vote count here as you come through it here. And then you come over here to Philadelphia. And we come here, where you have 91%, but it's just 11%.
It's only 11%.
Fetterman needs to keep. He's not going to get 92% of the vote in Philadelphia, I suspect, by the time we're done. But you need to keep it way, way up. About this is interesting. If you notice where you heard Kate Baldwin earlier tonight. When Donald Trump came last to Pennsylvania, they were out here. They were out here in Westmoreland County, Latrobe, right? So let's go back to 2020, and let's look at the presidential race. Come with me here, the presidential race. When Donald Trump comes, they go here. You see why.
Yeah.
Right? So Latrobe, Westmoreland County, that's where Oz is standing in front of Trump's plane with Trump, trying to turn out vote because he needs to run it up in Trump country, Pennsylvania. Where was he last night? He was over here. Come down from Allentown, you come down here. He was in Pennsburg, which is right here, just south of Lehigh County, about 25 miles from Doylestown, which is the county seat of Bucks County, right? So let's go back to the Senate race when, in 2016, when Pat Toomey, who has this Senate seat, won re-election, right? He lost Montgomery County, but again, the margins. Look at that, right? Look at the margins there for Pat Toomey. Very same year in the presidential race. Look at the margins for Hillary Clinton, right? So Pat Toomey was much more competitive in the suburbs than Donald Trump back in 2018, and Pat Toomey won Bucks County, right? We don't have any votes in Bucks County yet. Watch this one tonight. If Mehmet Oz can keep this one, this is the more blue collar of the suburban collars. You know this better than I do. Of the collar counties of Montgomery, right around Philadelphia, Montgomery County, Bucks County, you come down here as well to Delaware County, and you come back here just to look.
I keep telling you, it's Delco.
Delco, right. I said that last time because you told me to on television, and Twitter loved it. But you come back to the results now of where we are. This is very early, no, but this is where we're going to watch.
Yeah.
It's going to be right here. Can Oz win or run about even here? And can he get closer here than Donald Trump did against Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden? Because this is why, right here, is why Joe Biden won the Commonwealth. Hillary Clinton just lost it, and Joe Biden won it right here.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, again, as we're looking in Georgia, the ticket splitting. It'll be interesting to see the people that vote for the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who's a Democrat, but then cross the aisle and vote for, let's see, this is what county?
I just switched it over.
This is just the state. Okay.
This is.
We obviously we do not expect this to be the result, but it will be interesting to see how many people vote for Shapiro and then vote for Oz for Senate, because that will be a phenomenon as well, like the reverse of what we're seeing in Georgia.
Yeah, and that will be, we will look here and we will look up here, Northampton County, Luzerne County, Lehigh County, and then the Philadelphia suburban counties to see if you get ticket splitting in the governor's race, like we're beginning to see in Georgia, and we'll see if we see it when we get more results in Ohio. But that race, the governor's race there is called.
My mom's from North Carolina. Can we check that out?
We have to come to Senate, come to North Carolina. Sherry Beasley remains ahead here. This has been a static vote count for a little while, though, 53 to 45.
Again, got to figure most of this is still early vote.
Right, yes, it's disproportionately. Now, if you're a Democrat looking at this map, you're saying, okay, Mecklenburg County, that's number one. We're running it up. That's great. It's 50% of the vote. The challenge for Ted Budd is he's not going to win Mecklenburg County. The challenge is to narrow that margin some because it's the number one county. It's almost 11% of the state population. This is Charlotte, and then up here, again, suburbs, and you get to more, it gets more exurban as it goes out. That's why it gets more competitive, right? In here, it's blue, but the Democrats do well in the close-in suburbs if you went precinct by precinct.
It's all the margins, because she's going to have to do better in that county.
Right, you'd get more red out there. So then you come up to Raleigh. This is where Democrats have high hopes about North Carolina. Why? Because they win the African-American vote, they win younger voters, and they win college-educated voters. And you have the research triangle up here, which is why Democrats keep saying we're going to flip North Carolina. We're going to make it a blue state as opposed to a leans red state, even though it has a Democratic governor right now. You would say it leans red. And she's running up that's 67% right there, running it up in Durham. This is the 6th largest of the 100 counties in North Carolina. So you're looking at a very competitive race as it comes in. I would just wait. We're at 53% now. Let's see if that number holds up when we get above 60.
Let's bring in David Chalian at the Battleground Desk, if we can, to tell us more about the vote we're actually seeing here in North Carolina and what we're not seeing. David?
Yeah, Jake, your presumption about this being a lot of early vote is correct. I want to show you here, Sherry Beasley obviously now has 1.1 million votes in this race to Ted Budd's 971,000 votes. We've got 53% of the vote in, the estimated vote is in. How much of this is pre-election early vote? 96%. And as we've been talking about, the pre-election early vote, absentee vote, that tends to favor Democrats. Democrats participate in that early voting in more robust numbers than Republicans. At the end of the day, we think in North Carolina, only 55% is going to be pre-election vote. So right now, most of what you're seeing there is pre-election vote. I just want to show you this one other board that we can break down the different kinds of votes. So, among male voters, Sherry Beasley has a 46 percentage point lead over Ted Budd, and there's still about a quarter of the mail vote to be counted. Early in person, she has a much narrower lead, 6.2%, and most of that is already in what you're looking at. But look at where Ted Budd's campaign is focused on right now. He has a 37.6% lead on Election Day vote, and 95.6% of it still is waiting to be counted, Jake. So obviously the Budd folks are saying, hey, that's a huge advantage category for us, and basically nothing you're looking at in the overall vote is Election Day vote yet, Jake.
That's an important point to make, David Challion at the Battleground desk. So
I just popped this up from.
So
a
this is
different
outstanding
perspective.
vote.
This is live outstanding vote. So what do we know that's missing? And as David noted, so you see these big blue circle. There's a lot of votes missing in the Raleigh area. There's a lot of votes missing in the Charlotte area. Up here by Winston-Salem, the blue tells you the Democrat is leading there now. Now, even in places where Ted Budd is not going to catch or pass Sherry Beasley, David's point about so much day of vote still being out there, that's where he narrows the margins, right? When that vote comes in, if it comes in like we saw in 2020, and as the polling indicates it will come in this year, and again, we'll count them and see if that's the way it turns out. But then you also see all these medium-sized, moderate-sized, and even smaller-sized red circles. There is a ton of outstanding vote in the Republican areas of North Carolina. That will be Election Day vote, and that will be disproportionately, Ted Budd is leading in these places. You just pop one up to take a peek at it. You see Union County, he's leading now with just early vote, where, Sherry Beasley, again, a lot of Democratic votes among the early vote, she's getting 39%. Let's see, when we get up to 75, 80%, let's revisit some of these places and see what happens when that comes in. So if you look at this map, you see the big circles, and you say there are a lot of Democratic votes out there, but just remember, that means the Democrat is leading in that area right now. And so when the Election Day vote comes in, the Democrat is likely in the big urban areas to stay ahead, to stay leading. The question is, can Ted Budd narrow the margins? If he does, that will change. Well, with 94% of the vote today yet to be counted, and he's up 37 percentage points. I mean, the Ted Budd people know he's running very competitively. We got a lot of Ted Budd votes yet to count. Can I take a quick peek at Georgia Senate while we're at it? Just because I'm wondering what. Let's pull it up, and we'll see where we are. 41%, and it's 52%. 41% is 52-46. Just went up to 99,000 vote lead for Senator Warnock. Senator Warnock, obviously the Democratic incumbent. Again, we have a lot of votes to count in Georgia. This is disproportionately early vote. The key there is watch the two leading candidates. Is someone at the end of the night above 50. That number has stayed pretty stable right there. Again, you're looking at this. This is the Georgia Senate race, and you come over to the governor's race. The Democratic candidate in the Senate race is at 52%. The Democratic candidate in the governor's race is trailing at 49% if you round that up. One of the challenges, we break this down throughout the night, how many Democrats are voting Warnock for Senate but Kemp for governor? We'll get more of that as we play it out. And again, you look at the governor's map as it is right now. We close here on the Senate map right now. Democrats still leading. This is what they want in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Ohio. But, Jake, that's disproportionately early vote in the hour ahead. We will get more. We will indeed, because we're just moments away from another chance to make projections as polling places close in Arkansas. And CNN is making a projection right now. CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Todd Young will be reelected in the state of Indiana, the Hoosier state, getting another term with Senator Todd Young. In Arkansas, it is too early to call between incumbent Senator John Bozeman and Democrat Natalie James. Too early to call at this moment right now. Let's take a look at the balance of power right now in the U.S. Senate. Democrats hold 36 seats. Republicans hold 36 seats as well. 28 seats remain. Remember, you need 51 seats to control the U.S. Senate. Republicans need to pick up one net seat from the Democrats in order to win control of the U.S. Senate. Let's talk about governor's races now. Boris Sanchez has more there.
Jake, we have three projections to bring you, all three of them Republican holds, beginning in the state of New Hampshire. Chris Sununu, there are rumors he may run for president in 2024. Sununu winning a fourth term, defeating physician Tom Sherman. Meantime, in the state of South Carolina, not a competitive race there. The incumbent Republican Henry McMaster defeating former Democratic Congressman Joe Cunningham to win another 4 years. An update now from Tennessee, another reliably red state. Donald Trump won 60-ish% of the vote there in 2020. Bill Lee winning re-election. the incumbent Republican defeating ICU physician Jason Martin. Let's get a look at some key race alerts now, beginning with that all-important race we will not stop talking about in the state of Georgia. The last time we checked, Stacey Abrams had the lead. Now that has flipped. Brian Kemp, the incumbent Republican, leads with roughly 40,000 votes, with 42% of the vote in. Notably, Kemp above that 50% threshold, meaning he could avoid a runoff. Let's get a look at Texas now. Former Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke with a 60,000 vote advantage right now over incumbent Republican Greg Abbott, about 26% of the vote in Texas. An update now, a key race alert from the state of Michigan. Incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer, I should say, locked in a tough re-election battle against conservative commentator Tudor Dixon. Right now, Whitmer sitting 55,000 votes ahead, still very, very early in the night in Michigan, only 3% of the vote in there. We also have a key race alert to bring you from the state of Pennsylvania, where Attorney General Josh Shapiro has a 287,000 vote advantage over Doug Mastriano. Remember, Mastriano's an election denier who tried to overturn the 2020 election results in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Still early there, though, only 8% of the vote in. Let's turn it over to my friend Casey Hunt, who has an update for us on Senate races. Casey.
And you know what, Boris? We've got some really interesting comparisons to show you between what we just learned about the governor's races and where we stand here in the Senate. And let's start in Georgia, where Raphael Warnock is leading 51.9% to Herschel Walker's 46.4%. Just to refresh, the governor's race looks the opposite. Kemp at 50.9, Abrams at 48.6. That really shows you the difference here in terms of performance. We got 43% of the vote in Georgia. We expect it to stay close all evening. Now let's check in on North Carolina, where Sherry Beasley's at 52% to Ted Budd's 46.3%. You just heard that great breakdown from John King about where the votes are still out. There is reason for the Budd campaign to potentially be optimistic here. We're going to be sticking close to this all night. 55% of the vote in there. Now let's go to Ohio, where Tim Ryan is out to an early lead, 56.9% to J.D. Vance's 43%. But it is still extremely early in Ohio. And of course, this is a state that has trended very red in recent years. We've got 29% of the vote in Ohio. But now let's go to New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan is sitting at 60.7% to Don Bolduc's 38.2%. Democrats in New Hampshire telling me they feel very good about where Maggie Hassan is at this hour. But of course, it's extremely early. Just 14.9% of the vote has been counted in New Hampshire. But now let's check in on Pennsylvania, because we can compare these numbers here to what Boris just told us in the governor's race. John Fetterman at 80.1% to Mehmet Oz's 17.9%. Obviously, the race is going to end much closer than where it stands right now. But Shapiro is sitting at 84.5%. He's the Democratic candidate for governor. That gives you a little bit of an idea of how Fetterman is underperforming Shapiro, which has been the concern for Democrats all the way along, that potential ticket splitters, especially in the Philadelphia collar counties, would pick Mehmet Oz for Senate and Shapiro for governor. Jake.
All right, Casey, thanks so much. Really appreciate that. We've been telling you all night there are about 82 House seats that are competitive, races that are competitive, that we're really keeping an eye on, because it is in those 82 races that the balance of power in the House of Representatives will be won or lost. Let's give you an update right now. Right now, of the 23 competitive seats that are too early to call, the voting has ended, but they're too early to call. Democrats are leading in 15 of them. Republicans are leading in 8 of them. It's early yet. That doesn't necessarily mean Democrats are going to win 15 of them, but that is the state of play as of right now. Let's go over to John King at the Magic Wall to talk more about some of these House seats. Tell us what you're seeing, John.
Well, to your point, leading the vote. We're not done in these races. And again, if you're watching at home and you're a Democrat, you think, or even a Republican, Democrats are winning, right? Well, that's a better number for Democrats maybe than some might have thought coming into the House, but they need to do better than that in these competitive seats. So let's just come over here and remind people, in the uncalled races here, it's the ahead that matters. So we're going to come over here and we'll look at these competitive races. If you're the Democrats and you're looking at this map, you start in the Northeast. Number one, ranked choice voting here. And we got a long way to go in this district here. Only 2% of the vote in. Jared Golden, a Democrat running in a district Donald Trump carried, if these were the lines, in 2020 by 6 points. This is a very tough lift for a Democratic incumbent. He's done it before. So we'll see how it plays out. That's one. That would be one. This one we might not know the answer for a long time because of the ranked choice voting. So then you come down to the state of New Hampshire and you pop it up and you see 2 districts, Democrats leading in both right now, but we are very early in the count in New Hampshire. But if you're at the Democratic campaign headquarters or the Republican campaign headquarters, these ones here, you're looking at these, Republicans can get a majority without these seats. But if they're red at the end of the night, you're talking about a bigger Republican majority, which is why we will keep an eye on these competitive races. A tenacious Democratic incumbent in a tough race. She knows the district. She knows she campaigns hard. Again, over here, a Democratic incumbent, Chris Pappas. We talked earlier, Governor Sununu is winning big in the state, right? So the question is, can all the Democrats, whether it's the Senate race or the House races, hang on in that environment? So let's pull it out, come back nationally, and drop down. I started my career in the state of Rhode Island. You see red in Rhode Island, you want to take a look at it because this district has been Democratic for a very, very long time. This is a surprising candidate here, very, very close. Seth Magaziner, state treasurer, against the former Cranston mayor, Alan Fung. Republicans, if they can pick up this seat, if this seat is red at the end of the night, Republicans will have a majority, and I would argue that majority would be rather large because this is a Democratic 13-point. Joe Biden, by the lines of this district today, would have won it by 13 points in 2020, so watch the result. Up about 62%. That's a very close race. We keep watching it. But if you're looking at the map, that would be a big takeaway for the Republicans. We come down here to New Jersey. This has been a race people have been looking at. Again, another Democratic incumbent who's in a tough district. This was a Joe Biden by just shy of 4% district in 2020. Tom Malinowski ahead at the moment. This is early vote, running against the son of the former governor, Tom Kean. 11%, one of the competitive districts we're watching. Again, if you're seeing how big of a Republican night is it, if they win the 1% or the marginal districts, okay. Can they win the 4% districts? And then you build from there. That's how Republicans are trying to build. And then we'll just come back and we come down in here. We come check back in two places. We'll do Virginia first, then we'll check Pennsylvania. And again, Republicans continue to lead. We've been checking on these because the polls closed earlier in two of the three competitive races in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Just checking on the margin one more time again. That one got closer. You have Jennifer Wexton still ahead, but Hung Kao has closed that to 49% right there. We're at 90%, and we're watching it. And so think about that. Think about that even if Wexton holds on to win this seat. This is an 18-point Democratic advantage for Joe Biden in 2020 if the lines were as they are today, and you have a Republican candidate at the moment with 10% of the vote out. Could change, 10% in the populated suburbs here just outside of D.C. But that is a close race in a district that, if you went back 2 years ago, was not close. That tells you about the environment. You drop down here, and again, Leslie Vega, we're at 89%, a little shy here in a district. This is a Democrat +7 district, and you have the Republican candidate ahead by 4 or 5 points. 5 points if you do just a shy shade of it, and then you come down here. Again, we've talked about this before. The most vulnerable Democrat in the Commonwealth of Virginia is Elaine Luria. 68% of the vote, so you're hoping and hoping and hoping, but that's a pretty healthy lead for the Republican candidate, Jen Kiggins, there. So what does that mean? You go race by race. People at home might start to get confused. What it means is we're starting to fill in the map. Democrats are leading in 18 of these competitive districts, which means they're leading at the moment in more competitive districts, which is good news, but it's not good enough news in the sense that Democrats have to win 2/3 of the competitive races to have a chance to hold the House majority.
Also, I would imagine that some of this is early vote.
Yes.
Meaning that the Democrats are leading right now because Democrats disproportionately vote early, right. Vote by mail, et cetera.
Right. Without a doubt, that's what's happening here. Just to illustrate your point, I bring up Ohio, and I just want to check if the vote count has gone. It's gone up some, but not much. About a third of the vote now. Marcy Kaptur, again, her district used to be cut off about here and come east. They added Republican areas, the Ohio legislature, Ohio governor, Republican legislature. They added seats here. But she's up comfortably at the moment, but it's a third of the vote, so we want to see. And this would be news down here in that this is a Republican incumbent, Steve Chabot, Cincinnati, and the suburbs to there. It gets more rural as you get to the north. Again, 33% of the vote in, though, and it's all early vote.
So let me just bring up, remember, there are 82 competitive races that we're looking at overall. Right now, 27 of them, the polls have closed, and CNN is saying they're too early to call. 18 of those seats, Democrats are leading in of the 27. So Democrats are leading in 18 of the 27 competitive seats that are too early to call. Republicans are leading in 9 of the competitive seats that are too early to call. Again, early vote. We don't know what's going to happen. This does not mean the Democrats are going to win 18 of the 27, but this is some reason for hope if you're a Democrat watching at home.
It's some reason for hope that at least you're competitive, and you hope maybe as you move further west you get more. The challenge for the Democrats is if you come, the House today, if you come back to the House where we are today, turn off the competitive seats. Again, the lines are different this time, so in some ways it's still a tad misleading to show it. But the basic math is not, that you have 220 Democrats and 212 Republicans in the House today. And so the challenge is Republicans need only a net gain of 5. So when you come back to this year and where you're looking at this, and this is all of the races right now, you only need a net gain of 5. And in those competitive races, 57 of them are Democratic incumbents, so only 22 Republican incumbents. Joe Biden, of the 82 competitive districts, when we put them up on the map, and let me just bring those up to highlight them, of these 82 competitive districts, Joe Biden carried 60 of them 2 years ago, or would have if the lines had been as they are this year in 2020. Joe Biden would have carried 60. So the fact that the Democrats essentially need to win those 60.
Right.
They need to win them. They need to win a number, somewhere around that number to keep it. And it's just, again, competitive, yes. Competitive enough. Looking at this map, we're not done.
Yeah.
The early instinct is probably not.
So put up the House of Representatives as it stands today, because I want to show something to people. If we can zoom in on New England right now. Okay.
I can stretch it out for you.
Stretch it out for us. Can you do that?
No, it doesn't want to go. There we go.
Okay. New England is entirely blue, right? We're not counting about New York. We're not counting New York, which is here, and we're not counting New York, which is here. It's entirely blue. But as you pointed out, right now in Rhode Island, where you started out as a reporter,
come forward.
It's red.
And you look, some red. And now that Cape Cod district, there's just a few votes in. That's Bill Keating's district, his Democratic district. If that stays red, then we're having a huge Republican night. But that Rhode Island seat, those results are real. You come in here, all the results are real. I shouldn't use that kind of language in this environment. I mean contextual. You're up to 70% of the vote here. What I meant by that is that if you come to this district here, you're looking at a tiny number of votes.
Right.
Tiny number of votes. So it's not contextual yet. I need to be careful in this environment about the words we use.
My point is just that your point about, like, if Republicans, and we haven't called anything in New England, but if Republicans are picking up seats in New England, which is currently all blue, that says something about what we might see. Again, it's all early, but I'm just saying the fact that it's even competitive.
Right, and in this one here, candidates do matter. Seth Magazine is the state treasurer. Ellen Fung was the mayor of Cranston, which is a city right here south of Florida, south of Providence, I'm sorry. This is where I started my career. He was a popular mayor. He picked up the trash. They filled the potholes. And so you have a popular mayor running against a Democrat who's very well known in the state. His dad was very prominent in Rhode Island when I was there 30+ years ago. But it's inflation. It's the national environment, and a competitive candidate, somebody who is well known in a predominantly white, blue-collar, working district. And again, remember those words, right? Predominantly white, working-class district that used to be Democratic. We've seen in other parts of the country they're trending Republican. We're not done here yet, but that's something to watch. We're going to be analyzing. We get Challian in the room, a lot of coffee, go through the exit polls for weeks and weeks after this, if that holds.
All right, we're going to get another big round of results straight ahead, including the high-stakes contest for senator and governor in Arizona. That's coming up after a break. Stay with us. It's an election night in America. Welcome back. Ahead this hour, big stakes as voting ends in 15 states, and we're going to get a huge new round of results that's going to help decide the battle for control of the U.S. Congress. At 9 p.m. Eastern, polls are going to close in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, New Mexico, New York, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. The battle for 218 House seats, the number needed to win control of the chamber, is heating up as we get deeper into the night. 82 House seats are on the line in the states where polls are closing at the top of the hour. 23 of those seats are competitive and have the potential to tilt the balance of power. In the fight for the U.S. Senate, Arizona is a critical battleground. Incumbent Democratic Senator Mark Kelly is running for a full term after his special election win 2 years ago. The former astronaut faces Republican venture capitalist Blake Masters. Masters has received millions in funding from his boss, billionaire Peter Thiel. In Wisconsin, Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes is aiming to become the state's first black U.S. senator. He's challenging Republican incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, a close Trump ally who has downplayed the January 6th insurrection. In Colorado, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet is seeking a third term in the purple state that has been leaning blue in recent years. Bennet faces a competitive challenge from a moderate Republican, construction company CEO Joe O'Dea, who has tried to distance himself from Donald Trump. Turning to the governors, in Arizona, the Secretary of State, Democrat Katie Hobbs, is battling for an open gubernatorial seat now held by Republicans. She faces former television anchor Kari Lake. Lake is one of the most vocal candidates spreading Trump's false claims about the 2020 election. In Michigan, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer has faced harsh criticism from Republicans for her pandemic response. She faces Republican conservative commentator and first-time candidate Tudor Dixon. In New York State, Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul is in a more competitive race than expected against Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin. Hochul is the former lieutenant governor who rose to the top job last year after Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned amid scandal. And in Texas, former Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke is in a tough fight to unseat Republican Governor Greg Abbott in that deep red state. We're just minutes away from the second biggest round of poll closings tonight. Let's go to our correspondents. First to Arizona, Kyung La is covering the Republican candidates for governor and senator, Kari Lake and Blake Masters. Kyung, what is happening there in these final moments before polls close?
Well, they are watching the clock very, very closely here, Jake, and here is why. I'm just taking a look through the Maricopa County Elections Department website. There are hundreds of people in line at dozens of locations. And so we're seeing the Republican candidates who are expecting to really have their voters come out today, tweeting again and again, stay in line. Kari Lake tweeting, stay in line, hold the line. They want as big of a turnout as they can today. Now, when these results start to drop, and we do not expect them until another 1 hour and 10 minutes, polls do close in 9 minutes now. When those results drop, we are hearing all the campaigns saying, patience, patience. We are hearing from U.S. Senate candidate Mark Kelly, a nominee, Mark Kelly, saying whoever is leading tonight may not be the winner. That is the key. It is too early after that first drop. So all of these campaigns saying, we're going to watch these numbers, we're going to watch the turnout. And someone else who is also watching what is happening here very carefully is Donald Trump. Kari Lake's campaign saying that he called her twice, ending one of his calls by saying, go get him, girl. Jake.
All right, Kyung La at the headquarters for Kari Lake and Blake Masters. Let's go north and east now to Omar Jimenez, who is in the campaign headquarters of incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson. Omar, what is the mood there? What are you hearing from the Johnson campaign?
Well, Jake, right now, the cautiously optimistic Senator Ron Johnson is mingling among his supporters here at their election night party in Neenah, Wisconsin, and more of the central part of the state. Now, obviously, he is trying to win a third term here, and with it, he has brought implications of what that would mean. One, it could contribute to a change in power in the Senate, which means he would chair an investigations committee, and he has already said he is ready to ramp up the number of investigations out of Congress. On the other side of things, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, he has told us he is feeling very good tonight. He feels that they have done everything they could do up to this point, and hearing from party leadership in the state, Democratic leadership, feel that one thing that they're watching for tonight is that absentee ballots will be counted later. They're traditionally among the last ballots to be counted here at central counting facilities across the state. So they are watching for a potential red mirage and then some of their support to come in later in the night. Talking to Republican leadership, they're aware of it, but they say they feel good about what they've seen on Election Day itself, Jake.
All right, Omar Jimenez, thank you so much. With Johnson campaign headquarters in Wisconsin, and we're taking a look at the lay of the land in the U.S. Senate, and we were just joking about what's going on in Maryland right now. Tell everybody.
A look at the map can be deceiving early on in the night as we count results, as we've said. Just quickly, where Kyung La and Omar, we're about to get two of the most competitive states in American politics when those results start to flow in Arizona and Wisconsin. But just to pop up, you see the state of Maryland is red right now. Chris Van Hollen is the Democratic incumbent. Chris Chaffee is his opponent. It's 13-12. Okay, but again, if you look at watching at home and you're just passing through quickly and you see the map red, that's why we want to explain it when we see things like this. We'll come back to that one in 10 or 15 minutes and we'll see if that holds up. That would be a big surprise. But there are The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is blue at the moment. That's a Republican-held Senate seat at the moment. North Carolina is blue at the moment. That's a Republican-held Senate seat today. Ohio is blue at the moment. That is also a Republican-held Senate seat. Now, as we move later into the night, people watching at home, we've been cautioning you all night long. Please wait, please wait. Let's wait for more votes. Well, we're getting more votes, but we're still only at 37% of the vote. So you're still looking at disproportionately in the state of Ohio early vote. I just was looking here a moment ago because this is Tim Ryan's House district. He's a member of the House of Representatives trying to run statewide in a very complicated red-leaning state. This is his House district. This is that base of his House district. It stretches out and down a little bit. Early votes in there, 33%, running a big lead. That's what he needs to do. Obviously, these are the people who know him best. This is his Democratic base. And you come up to Cuyahoga County, only 30% of the vote in here, 74% to 26%. That's a big deal, right? This again. Democratic base. Cleveland and the suburbs around it. You move over here to Lake County. This will be interesting to watch, right? If this is blue at the end of the night, Tim Ryan is running very, very competitive because this gets more Republican as you move out Lake County in the suburbs. He's ahead at the moment, but it's half of the vote. And David Chalian is going to join us in just a second because disproportionately, I believe, we're still looking at more early votes than day of votes.
So right now, 37% of the vote in Ohio is in, and Tim Ryan is up with 37% in. Let's bring in David Chalian at the Battleground Desk to tell us. David, tell us who this 37% is and what we're waiting for.
Yeah, so you guys see that lead. Tim Ryan with 868,000 votes. J.D. Vance, 778,000 votes. You noted, Jake, that's with 37% of the estimated vote is fully in. 82% of that vote is pre-election vote. It's early vote, absentee by mail vote, early in-person vote, where Democrats tend to participate in bigger numbers than Republicans do. At the end of the day, we think it's only going to be 32%. 32% of the Ohio vote overall will be pre-election vote. So right now, this vote that you're looking at is overinflated with early vote. Not that they're not real votes and they're counted. It's just making up such a larger share than we think it will make at the end of the day. And that gives J.D. Vance and his campaign hope that as more and more of that election day vote comes in, that Republican-leaning vote, it's going to help him potentially overtake Tim Ryan in these vote totals.
All right, we'll keep watching the actual vote come in. And John, can you take me down to Georgia, as the devil went down once? What are we looking at there?
Easiest way is a nonstop Delta flight from DCA. Look, you see again, remember this was not this close earlier, right?
Yep.
And not only was it not this close earlier, Senator Warnock was above 50%. Again, we're still at 53%. If you were with us in 2020 for the presidential race, early 2021 for the two Georgia runoffs, these are espresso races. These are you're up late and you're probably counting the next day as well. But you are getting more of the vote and you are seeing the margin tighten. So 49.6 to 48.7. 19,000 vote lead. This has narrowed quite considerably. And again, we were talking earlier, the Democratic incumbent senator on top right there, when you look at the map, this is a state where you have a Democratic incumbent senator and a Republican incumbent governor running in the same election, which makes an interesting dynamic.
Before you do that, I want to bring in David Chalian at the Battleground Desk to tell us more. David, 53% of the vote is in, estimated. Tell us what we're waiting for.
Yeah, so we're breaking this down, Jake. Mail vote, early in person, election day vote. I just want to show you what is still uncounted. So in mail vote, 36.8% advantage for Raphael Warnock. 51.6% of it's still uncounted. Early in person vote, 35.6% still uncounted. He's got a much smaller advantage there. But the big Walker category, 42.4% lead for Herschel Walker among Election Day voters, and 87.6% of that vote still remains to be counted. So this is clearly going to be a close, tight race as we watch it all night long, guys.
All right, John, what else were you going to show us?
So a lot of that vote still to be counted. Just to follow up on that point before I check into the governor's race, then you see a lot of these gray counties here as well. That is rural Trump country or very Republican country. So we still have no votes there even counted at all. Just want to pop in some of this. See, you have no votes counted at all. Again, these are smaller counties, and so it's less than 1% of the population. But that's how Republicans run it up in the rural areas to counter it. So we have to see. I just want to check again. Democratic incumbent senator running in the same election as a Republican incumbent governor. Senator Warnock is at 49.5%. The governor is at 53%, and you see the Democratic Senate candidate at 46%. So you see the split, right? Split ticket voting between Brian Kemp getting 53% of the vote, and then you come over here, the Republican running 5 points behind and the Democrat running behind the Democratic senator. It's one of the fascinating dynamics, Jake. Georgia, one of several states where you look and you have a Republican incumbent governor. We've seen that in New Hampshire as well. Big question as we keep counting the votes. Can the Democratic senator there, Maggie Hassan, hold on? In Georgia, we'll see.
All right, John King, we are heading into the second busiest hour of the night. Polls are closing in 15 states with a slew of high-profile races in key battlegrounds, including Arizona. And we have a CNN projection for you right now in New York. CNN is projecting that the current Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Charles Schumer, will be reelected, defeating Joe Pinion. In South Dakota, CNN is projecting that a member of Republican leadership, Senator John Thune, will be reelected, defeating Brian Banks. And in Kansas, CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Jerry Moran will be reelected, defeating Democrat Mark Holland. Let's look at the map right now and talk about the races that we are not yet going to make a projection. They include the Senate races in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Louisiana, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. As of right now, we do not have a projection in those races. The balance of power, of course, 100 Senate seats. Democrats have 37 of those seats. Republicans have 38 of those seats. There are 25 seats remaining. Republicans only need to pick up one net seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. There are governor's races going on out there as well. Let's go to Boris Sanchez for that.
Jake, two projections to bring you right now, beginning with a familiar face being elected governor of Arkansas. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former Donald Trump press secretary / communications director, following in the footsteps of her father, Mike Huckabee, becoming the new governor of Arkansas. We should note she becomes the first woman elected governor of that state, defeating Chris Jones. Another projection to bring you now, this one from Rhode Island. There, incumbent Democrat Dan McKee will win his first full term in the governor's mansion. Remember, he replaced Gina Raimondo when she left the governor's mansion to join the Biden administration as the Commerce Secretary. We have some key race alerts to bring you now, beginning with the state of Texas. Last time we checked in, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke had a decent advantage. Right now, Greg Abbott, the incumbent Republican, has overtaken him, nearly 170,000 vote lead for Abbott, with 33% of the vote in. An update now from the Peach State, Georgia. Brian Kemp building on the lead that we saw him take earlier against Stacey Abrams. Right now, he stands 177,000 votes ahead, roughly 8% advantage for Kemp, still above that 50% threshold to avoid a runoff, with 55% of the vote in Georgia. Meantime, an unexpectedly close race in Oklahoma. A key race alert there. Kevin Stitt, the incumbent Republican, taking on Joy Hoffmeister, a Democrat who actually flipped parties just last year specifically for this race. Stitt right now, 43,000 votes ahead, with 34% of the vote in. Jake.
Boris, thanks so much. Let's the balance of power in the U.S. Senate, 44 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and one of those key states just changed color, John, Georgia.
And it is Georgia. We were talking earlier, number one, Senator Warnock was above 50. Number two, Senator Warnock was in the lead. Herschel Walker, the Republican candidate, now in the lead by 9,000 votes, up to 55%. I would say prepare for a little bit of a seesaw ahead, but to the point David Challing was making in our last conversation, as they begin to count more of the today vote, election day cast votes, that's where Republicans have an edge. Boris just noted Governor Kemp stretching his lead a bit. It's the very same dynamic. They're counting election day votes now. We're starting to count them as we move through the hour and the hours ahead. Remember, Georgia took us a long time in 2020, and those runoffs were close. So now we come back here. Come back here to the Senate race, and you just look at this. This is the state of Georgia today, an incredibly competitive state, a 9,000 vote lead. You're beginning to see the map fill in. If you're in the Walker campaign, number one, you still got 45% of the ways to go. But you also see, again, some of these rural counties, they're small, where we have no votes in at all. Those are going to be red at the end of the night. So the challenge is, I just want to go check up here a little bit. So first you come to Fulton County, Senator Warnock getting 75% of the vote there. Let's just go back and look at 2020 and the presidential race. Joe Biden getting 73%. So we come back here. I just want to check. So Senator Warnock doing what he has to do in Fulton County, at least at the moment, as we continue to count. Then you go over to Cobb County, right? You see it's a more competitive suburb, but Joe Biden won it by 14 points. Now let's come back to where we are and look at the Senate race in Cobb County. And it's a 20-point race. So around the Atlanta area at the moment, Warnock there doing quite well in what he needs to do. Just want to come over here to DeKalb County. Again, only 7% of the vote here, though. So in Atlanta and the suburbs, Senator Warnock is running strong. the question is, where are the Walker votes coming from? So let's see. One of the challenges was, you know, do the Trump voters turn out for not Donald Trump, right? Well, that's where Brian Kemp helps. Even though Brian Kemp and Donald Trump are in a feud, you have a Republican governor running well ahead of Herschel Walker. Republicans are coming out to vote. And in these counties where it's a small population center, it's less than 1% of the vote. So you say, well, it's not significant, but there are dozens of them. And those votes add up. This is a 28-point Donald Trump district, and there you see Herschel Walker running up big margins. Just to check on the governor's race here, governor's running up even slightly bigger margins in these areas. There's.
How did Trump do?
Sorry, let me come back there. We'll come on back there.
So 65 for Walker, and 67 for Kemp,
and 64. So Brian Kemp running a little stronger than Donald Trump in that rural area there.
So what's interesting is Warnock is outperforming Biden in some of these areas, or at least matching it. But it seems like definitely Kemp, and to a degree Herschel Walker, in some places are outperforming Trump in Georgia.
By percentage, yes. And we'll see how the raw votes turn out as we come back. So let's come back here and pull it out as we come. I just want to come back out to see if it changes as we go. There we go. Look at that. It just changed while we were looking at the counties. It swung again.
Speaking of states that have changed color, let's go north to the Tar Heel state.
Right. So Warnock now leading there, and Ted Budd, again, we talked about this dynamic earlier. First you get the early votes, then you start getting the election day votes. Senator Budd, 5,600 votes, so 5,676 votes ahead, very narrowly. But again, as you start to count those votes, and you start to fill in the rural areas as well, 67%, so 2/3 of the vote. We have a ways to go yet. And again, Sherry Beasley has run a remarkably competitive race. But when you see the dynamic of Democrats get to an early lead, that's the mail-in votes, the early votes that get counted first, Republicans pass them as we count them. We were saying earlier that if you're the Budd campaign, you're saying wait, and now we've seen as it comes in, and we want to play out. I just want to come back to this just because it changed while we were talking, and I just want to see how much so.
It flipped back.
Yeah. So now it has flipped back. It went from a 9,000 vote Herschel Walker lead to 115,000 votes.
That's a big bucket.
So that's a big. That's most likely a large urban precinct somewhere. You'd have to go back and find it.
DeKalb County is what I'm being told. So that's where the votes were.
I didn't write it down when we were here earlier, but there you go, right there. So if you had a large votes reported in DeKalb County and you're getting 87% of the votes, there's your votes right there. So again, you can have these quick and big swings in the night when you're still waiting for the large metropolitan areas and the big suburbs around them to report votes. Sometimes you get a big county reports a big chunk, and that's what happens.
Yeah, Warnock was up 7%, and now he's up 65% in that one
county.
So that's what came in, and these are votes. These are votes coming in, and it's going to go back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, and look, there's no question. We went through Georgia 2020, despite what Donald Trump says. And we went through the runoffs in early 2021. Georgia's very good, very solid at counting their votes. And so you just have to wait and watch it play out. And again, in a competitive state, you're going to get some swings.
Let's talk to David Chalian at the Battleground Desk if we can, to give us more of a breakdown of the vote in Georgia.
Yeah, just watching you guys, because we are looking at the geography of this. Like John just showed you, DeKalb County, at first it was only 7% in, then a huge batch of votes got in there in a Democratic county. But we're also looking at the kind of vote and breaking it down of what's still out there. So I want to just show you, among mail vote, Warnock has this big 36.8% lead. Roughly half of it, 49.5%, is still uncounted. Early in-person voting, Warnock, it's a much closer category between the two candidates. He's got a roughly 5 percentage point lead, and there's only 30% left of the early in-person vote to count. But John said it's going to be a seesaw. Look at this. 82.8% of the election day vote in Georgia is still to be counted, and that is a huge Herschel Walker category of vote. He's currently winning election day vote by 37.2 percentage points, and that is the biggest bucket of outstanding vote. So this is what is giving the Walker folks, even though you saw Warnock take that lead again, real confidence that they are very much still in this race.
Very interesting, David Chalian. Let's get one more look at the overall Senate landscape, and then I want to take you over, John, to the House.
And to David's point, early voting has been a growing phenomenon anyway, and you want the more people to participate, and therefore you give them earlier opportunities. That's good, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent. But obviously that accelerated in the 2020 election because of COVID, and so that's one of the lessons we're learning, and this is more complicated now than it was 10 years ago, just because you get people voting in different ways: early voting, mail-in vote, early in-person voting, mail-in voting, election day voting, and different states count them in different orders. So it's just more complicated, which requires us to be clear and contextual, and requires people at home to just be patient, because you're going to see seesaws, especially in these competitive races. I'm sorry, back to the question right now.
Well, right now, Democrats have 47 seats, Republicans have 42, and right now they're leading. They're leading in 47 seats, and 4 of those are Republican seats, and 42 Republicans are leading, and 1 of them is in a Democratic seat,
Right,
which is well, it was Georgia, now it's not.
No, Georgia's ahead now. The Democratic seat is, we're still looking at this Maryland
Oh,
race.
this Maryland.
So we still have 13.
13 votes.
Yeah, we still have 13 and 12. So we need Maryland to count some more votes. But if you come out here, again, let's just come out right here, and you're looking at, the Missouri Senate race. Again, Trudy Bush Valentine is not favored in the Missouri Senate race. We have just 6% of the vote in, and you see, where is it? Well, you're having vote right here in St. Louis, the suburbs outside of St. Louis, and in St. Louis proper. So again, it's what we're talking about earlier. If you look at the map at any given moment, it's very important. You could take a picture of this and say, wow, for the Democrats, because the Democrats are also leading at the moment. We've already projected this race,
right,
because we understand what's going to happen here. It's just that the Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, Collegetown, Topeka, Kansas urban area, Kansas City suburbs, the Kansas City, Missouri suburbs over in the Kansas City, Kansas side, these are predominantly Democratic areas. There's a House district over here that's a very competitive race that we'll be looking at later. And so you look at, you can't just look at the map now. What matters is the map, midnight tonight, noon tomorrow, midnight tomorrow night. We're going to be doing this for a couple of days, but this race is unlikely to be close. I just want to take a peek at this one, because you're looking at very early results here. This could be a competitive race if you talk to both parties involved. And again, it's very early vote in Denver, in the suburbs for the most part. Senator Michael Bennet. We talked about, would North Carolina or Ohio or Wisconsin be a surprise for Democrats? That's one of the ones we're keeping an eye on as a potential surprise for Republicans.
Let's take a look at the House map, if we could, just because right now there are 34 House seats that are competitive. We consider them to be competitive, that are too early to call. Of those House seats, Democrats are currently leading in 22 of them. Republicans are currently leading in 12 of them. That's not to say that those are going to be the final decisive answers as to what happens in those 34. But right now, Democrats are doing better in this early vote than well, they're doing well. They're doing what they need to do.
Yes, and so you're looking, these are just the competitive seats you're seeing on the map. If we come out of this, you're watching, these are of the 435 House districts, these are the ones globally of all that we have results in them. But now you just isolate it to the competitive seats, right? We just want to isolate it to the 82 competitive seats that we've identified. And we'll watch. We could be surprised. There could be other seats as well. But you mentioned, to your point, Democrats being very competitive. And again, so where were we earlier? Number one, at the moment, Democrats are holding both of the New Hampshire seats, 2 competitive seats that the Democrats are a bit nervous about. The Republicans, there's 1 there. And so then you come down here. The last time Jake and I were talking about the competitive House districts, the Republican was leading this district in Rhode Island. Now you see the Democrat has pulled ahead in the Rhode Island 2nd District. It's a little bit of Providence, it's Cranston, it's down to the southern part of the state, the western part of Rhode Island, 50.8% to 46.4%. So the Democrat has pulled ahead again as we count the votes. We get more votes throughout the hour. At the moment, that one was red just a few minutes ago. Now it is blue, still a long way to go. Then you come into the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is fascinating if it holds up. We know this is early vote. We know we have a long way to go to the count in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But there are 4 competitive House districts here, 2 in the east, 7 and 8, Matt Cartwright and Susan Wild. 2 out here in the western part of the country. Summer Lee's district right here is Pittsburgh, and you move forward from here, and you come up here, and you look at this district here. This is the old Connor Lamb district. The lines have been redrawn. At the moment, but again, very low vote count, Democrats are ahead in all 4 of those. This is a place where Republicans think they could pick up 2 or 3 seats. We'll watch. We have a ways to go, Jake. So remembering that the vote is still early, and where we are an hour, 2 hours from now will tell us a lot more about the House than right now.
All right, John, right now CNN is about to make 2 more projections in House races. In Florida, Republican Maria Elvira Salazar, CNN is projecting, has won a 2nd term in office in her Miami area district. It went narrowly for Trump in 2020. She is a former TV journalist. Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar will be reelected, CNN is projecting. In Virginia, Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, CNN is projecting, has been elected to a 3rd term in office. She represents the Washington suburbs in Northern Virginia. So that's 1 win for a Republican, 1 win for a Democrat. The balance of power right now, 48 Democrats have been elected, 92 Republicans have been elected. That includes 3 pickups. 295 seats are remaining. Remember, you need 218 seats in order to control the House of Representatives. In the U.S. House, of the competitive seats that we're keeping an eye on, Republicans have to win 26 of them, we now say. That is down from 27. So they have made one more gain there that they need to do. Democrats have as well. Democrats need to pick up 52. That is down from 53 in terms of competitive seats. Let's go to Casey Hunt now, who will tell us more about what's going on with the Senate races.
That's right, Jake. Let's check in across the map, and we're going to start in a place we've been all night, and that is Georgia, where Raphael Warnock in the lead right now, 51.2% to Herschel Walker's 47%. But as we've seen, this has been bouncing back and forth, and I expect that you're going to be hearing a lot of us talking about this tonight. Let's check in, though, now on Ohio, where J.D. Vance has taken the lead, 50.3% over Democrat Tim Ryan, the congressman, who now is at 49.7%. Again, Ohio has trended red in recent years. North Carolina, we've got Ted Budd, the Republican, narrowly ahead of Democrat Sherry Beasley, 49.4% to 48.6%. This is a real nail-biter at this hour, though we do have 70% of the vote in. Now let's go north to New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan is holding her lead in a pretty commanding way at 57.4% to Don Baldock's 41.3%. He is the Republican. Considering how Chris Sununu has performed as the Republican in the governor's race, pretty significant that Maggie Hassan is right there. Now let's take a look at Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman is sitting at 64.5% to Mehmet Oz's 33.1%. Obviously, we expect this race to end up much closer than what you're seeing on your screen right now. We only have about 15% of the vote in Pennsylvania. And let's check in on Colorado, where Michael Bennet is out to an early lead, 58.2% over Joe O'Dea, the Republican, 39.6%. This is not a seat that Democrats wanted to have to worry about, but that came online near the end of this midterm season as the national environment shifted for Republicans. We've got about a third of the vote in Colorado. We're going to be keeping an eye on that through the evening as well. Now we've got some key race alerts on the governor's races.
Yeah, but a handful of key race alerts beginning in the state of Texas. There, the incumbent Republican Greg Abbott maintaining a lead over former Congressman, former Senate and White House hopeful Beto O'Rourke. Right now, Abbott leading by 80,000 votes with 51% of the vote in Texas as he seeks a third term. Let's get an update now from the Peach State in Georgia. There, incumbent Republican Brian Kemp maintaining a slight advantage over Stacey Abrams, though the 90,000 vote difference between the two is a bigger margin than when Kemp won by 4 years ago. Keep that in mind. 64% of the vote in. He maintains an advantage over that 50% threshold. In Pennsylvania, Attorney General Josh Shapiro, 324,000 votes ahead of Doug Mastriano, 15% of the vote there in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let's get an update now, a key race alert from the state of Michigan. Incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer currently leading conservative commentator Tudor Dixon, an election denier as well, 11% of the vote in. We just got an update. It appears Whitmer is 37-ish thousand votes ahead as we get an update from Michigan. Let's take a look at a race that nobody expected would be as close as it was at the end. Incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul running for her full first term in office. She currently leads considerably over Congressman from Long Island and election denier Lee Zeldin, 265,000 votes as we just got the update from the Empire State, a 9% of the vote in right now in the state of New York. We'll send it back to you, Jay.
All right, Boris, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Let's take a look right now at the governor's races playing out. Some of them are playing out as we expected. Some of them are a lot different than we expected.
It's early. Among the governor's races out there, again, a handful of states that are absolutely key presidential battlegrounds in 2024. Every governor's race matters every year, but they matter all the more this year. Supreme Court sending abortion rights back to the states. So let's go through some of them as we go. Boris ended on this one, so let's just look. I want to make the point here that we're just very, very early, right? A surprisingly close race in the polling. We'll see what turns out on Election Day. Crime, a huge issue here. Kathy Hochul trying to win a full term for the first time. But the votes in so far, largely from down here in the New York City area, and a very tiny percent of the vote. You know, we're looking at Queens here. You're looking at the Bronx. We walk through Manhattan as you come over here. That's the early votes coming in there. So we have a long way to go in the state of New York.
Yeah, this race is much more competitive than that vote would indicate.
Yes, absolutely. So we move over to Michigan again. This has been a competitive race as well. We're only at 11% of the vote. You're watching the map. For me, it's just as the map filling in as one would expect. And you look at it, and the answer is yes. We'll see somewhere out here, Kent County, Grand Rapids, out this way. If Republicans do well here, they're competitive statewide, but it's only 3% of the vote. We'll see how this plays out. And then you come over here. This election will be decided. Wayne County is Detroit, which is down here. I skipped it because we have 0 votes in. It's 18% of the vote in Detroit. Tends to come in a little bit later than the other part of the state. This is where, though, it'll be fascinating. Oakland County, if you go back 25 years, this is a more Republican suburb, but this is where you have your upscale, college-educated voters who have become more and more Democratic. 60%, that's what Gretchen Whitmer needs to do. It's only 40%. And then we'll wait for here. This is Macomb County. Like Bucks County, where you're from, this is the more blue-collar, just north of suburbs when you come up here. And we'll see how this one comes in. Donald Trump did well in Macomb County. If you go back to the 1980s, this was where all the studies were done. The Democratic pollster string.
Right, the Reagan Democrats.
Reagan Democrats.
Right.
So we'll watch. We have a long way to go in Michigan. So as you move out here, you come this way. This is interesting because this would be, again, it's a very modest number of votes, and they all come from a critical suburb, mind you. Waukesha County, here's Milwaukee. Suburbs here, Democrats can get votes in the closer in suburbs. As you move more out west, exurbia, rural, it gets more Republican, but it's very early here. Tony Evers, the Democratic incumbent, again, Tim Michaels, near the end of the campaign, said, if you elect me, no Republicans will ever lose again in Wisconsin, which brings the democracy question into play very early. We'll watch this race play out. But again, key presidential battleground, key presidential battleground. When you move out here in the middle of the country, where you see this one, people don't think of Kansas as a Democratic state. Kansas has a Democratic governor. Kansas, remember, after Dobbs, had the big referendum where Kansas voters, common sense conservatives, said no to opening the state Supreme Court, to allowing more abortion restrictions. It'll be interesting to see. This is very early. You say 35% of the estimated vote, but if you're looking out here, this is red. This at the end of the night will be red, barring some huge surprise. Where are the votes so far? Well, again, it's just, we talked earlier, you're close to this is Kansas City, Missouri here, Johnson County, Wyandotte County. These are the Kansas City suburbs, if you will. And then you're moving into the Democratic area. Lawrence, Kansas is Douglas County. That's the 5th largest county, Democrat by 40 points, right? So you think Kansas is a red state, but it has a Democratic governor. This was a 40-point county for Joe Biden. You come over to the Topeka area. It was a Democrat +3, where the Democratic governor early on is running much bigger than that, obviously. So we'll see. Can Laura Kelly hold on in the state of Kansas? That's a big test for Democrats, a Democratic governor in the middle of the country in this time of year. Then you move up here to Nebraska, 23% of the vote. The Democrat is leading, but slow down in the sense that look at where the vote's coming in. Omaha, Lincoln, the Democratic areas. There's a whole lot of rural red Republican Kansas to still come in. A race that Republicans had hoped to make more competitive at the moment with about 40% of the vote in. The incumbent Democrat, Jared Polis, leading at the moment in Colorado. Interesting to watch if that plays out in tandem with the Senate race. We talked about that dynamic in Georgia, in New Hampshire. Otherwise, what happens to the governor vis-a-vis the Senate candidate in Colorado? They are both of the same party. Then we come down, just one more quick one, in New Mexico. The governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, running comfortably ahead, but very early votes coming in so far, Jake, only in Democratic areas. But the governor's race is, again, always critical for state issues, all the more important because of threats to democracy and the Supreme Court sending abortion rights back to the states.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And CNN has some more projections. Right now, CNN is projecting that incumbent Senator John Boozman from Arkansas will be reelected. He defeats Natalie James. In Vermont, CNN projects that Congressman Peter Welch will get the promotion and become the next senator from the state of Vermont in an open seat, defeating Gerald Malloy. Let's take a look at the overall balance of power in the 100-seat U.S. Senate. Democrats currently control 38 seats. Republicans currently control 39 seats. 23 seats are remaining. We also have a key race alert that we're going to go to Casey Hunt right now. Casey?
That's right, Jake. We're going to take a quick spin through all of these races for you. We got a whole bunch of vote in. We got Raphael Warnock sitting at 51% right now in Georgia to Herschel Walker's 47.2. He is, of course, right now above that critical threshold to avoid a runoff. We're going to be keeping close tabs. We've seen this move back and forth here in the last hour or so. 65% of the vote in there. Now let's check in on Ohio, where J.D. Vance still in the lead, but it's close, 50.3% to Tim Ryan, the Democratic congressman, 49.7%. John King is going to need to walk us through where the votes are still out to let us know if it's actually going to end up being that close. It's about 45% of the vote in there. Now in North Carolina, look at this. Ted Budd sitting at 50% to Sherry Beasley's 48%. This is actually a little bit of a wider lead than we've seen at some points on this race tonight. We've got 72% of the vote in North Carolina. All right, let's move now to New Hampshire, where we've got Maggie Hassan sitting at 57.8%, Don Bolduc sitting at 40.9%. Smart Republicans and Democrats that I'm talking to who are looking at these numbers say Hassan is in a very strong position at this hour. But, of course, we only have 30% of the vote in, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Now let's go out to Colorado. This, again, a reach for Republicans. Michael Bennet at 58.6% to Joe O'Dea, the Republicans, 39.2% at this hour. But, of course, we do need to know where the votes are coming in because we're only looking at 40% of them so far. Now let's check in on Wisconsin. Expected to be one of the tightest races on the map tonight. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. Mandela Barnes in the early vote out to 70% ahead of Ron Johnson, the incumbent Republican, who sits at 29.8% right now. I'm sure John King can explain to us why it looks that way. There's about 4% of the vote in right now in Wisconsin. Now I want to check in on Iowa, another unexpected on the map, but there was an Iowa poll late in the cycle from a very trustworthy pollster out there that showed Chuck Grassley, the incumbent Republican, in a tight race with Democrat Michael Franken. And some early returns show Franken out ahead, 58.3% to Chuck Grassley's 41.6%. But there is very little vote in Iowa at this hour. We only have 11% in. Let's also dip in on Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman, the Democrats, at 60.5%. These numbers are moving in real time. To Dr. Mehmet Oz's 37%. This is another situation where they're going to count votes very slowly. This is one where there's already litigation challenges, questions about how these votes are going to be counted, and we expect that's going to go late into the night. 17% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Now, Boris has got some governor's races to talk to us about, some of which are in some of these same states.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how voters may have split tickets in these races, Casey. First, let's start in the state of Texas. There we have an update. Incumbent Republican Greg Abbott building on the earlier lead he had on Beto O'Rourke, the former congressman, 149,000 votes ahead for the two-time governor of Texas, 52% of the vote in there. Let's take a look at the state of Georgia. Brian Kemp right now with 111,000 vote advantage over Stacey Abrams, 66% of the vote in. Notably, he is above that 50% threshold, meaning he could potentially avoid a runoff if this holds. And we just got an update there. Now 115,000 vote lead for Kemp. Let's take a look at the state of Michigan. Incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer locked in this tough re-election battle with conservative commentator, former TV host Tudor Dixon. A 42,000 vote advantage for Whitmer, roughly an 8% lead right now, still very early with only 12% of the vote in. Let's get an update for you from Pennsylvania. There, the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, he has nearly a 300,000 vote advantage over Doug Mastriano, one of the most extreme candidates you are going to see on the board tonight. 17% of the vote in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, one that our Jake Tapper knows very well. Jake.
All right, Boris, thanks so much. Let's take a look at this governor's race right now in Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the sitting attorney general, running for governor against a state legislator named Doug Mastriano that Boris just aptly described. What's going on here?
So you're watching, fills in, more votes coming in, as you say. It's a nearly 300,000 vote lead for Josh Shapiro at the moment, who was favored in the late polls in this race. But if you just want to go through, a place, I was just looking at one place. This is one of the closest, most competitive swing counties in Pennsylvania. And you see Josh Shapiro with 82% to 16%. Northampton County, Josh Shapiro may win it. He may win it comfortably. He's not winning it by that, which tells you that this is early vote. Right? It just tells you it's early vote, which is disproportionately Democrat. It's only 20% of the vote. But this is a key swing county. Donald Trump won it just barely in 2016 when he won the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Joe Biden flipped it, won it just barely in 2020 when he won. So it is never like that. Even if Josh Shapiro wins it big, it is never like that. It just doesn't happen. So that tells you you're looking at early votes, and we have a long way to go. So where else you look here? You come down to Philadelphia to see what votes in here. Only 13% of the vote in. You see Josh Shapiro at 94%. The Democrat most likely will be overwhelmingly up when we get to Philadelphia's final count.
But not that up.
If he's up by that much, then we have a blowout on our hands, if he is up by that much. And so then you walk out from here, And again, you come to Bucks County, this is the more competitive of the taller suburban counties. It still was a Joe Biden by 4 points in 2020.
Yeah.
Again, that would be shocking, but you'd rather be ahead than behind. But again, you're looking disproportionately at early votes. And so this is the governor's race. Let's just come out and look at it. Again, whether it's early or late in the count, you want to start ahead. There's the governor's race. Josh Shapiro at 64.4%.
Right.
The Republican
623,000. Yeah.
Right. The Republican candidate for governor just shy of 34%, 327,000 if you round that up a little bit. And you just bring it over to the Senate race now, and you just see John Fetterman running behind, underperforming his Democratic ticket mate, if you will. They're both statewide office holders, by the way. Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, the Lieutenant Governor. So they both have won statewide before. You see 60% if you round that up to 38% if you round that up. Again, there has been no indication that this race would be anything like that. We expect this race to be very competitive. We're still shy of 20% of the overall vote, 60 to 34 as it goes up now. I just want to check again. Just one of my favorite places to always look. And again, this is early vote. Josh Shapiro was way up in Northampton County. John Fetterman is as well. He may well win Northampton County. Often the person who wins Northampton County goes on to win the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Almost always the person who wins Northampton County goes on to win, but it's not going to be by a margin like that, which tells me, Jake, that we're looking disproportionately at early vote.
Early vote, absolutely. And just to put an underlining on the point you were making, John Fetterman, again, 18%, 19% in. This is early. This is not determinative. But John Fetterman, 59.6% of the vote. Josh Shapiro, who's running for governor on the same ticket, he's at 64.4%. Shapiro running about 5 percentage points ahead. And also when it comes to Oz running about 5 percentage points ahead of the Republican running for governor. Just two very different races, ticket splitters. Let's find out what this vote is, though, with the Battleground Desk with David Chalian. David, this is 19% of the vote in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is reporting. What is this 19%?
Yeah, so as you guys are saying, it is an early vote situation here. So roughly half of what we're seeing in Pennsylvania, 49% of that current vote is pre-election early vote. So that may be helping boost Fetterman to this 600,000 vote total he is at right now versus Oz 385,000. We expect at the end of the day for the share of the overall vote that is going to be early vote to be about half that. We think it's going to be 25% of the overall vote at the end of the day. So right now, as a proportion of the vote, that early vote is sort of double in size. And that is what is giving Fetterman, giving Shapiro these larger advantages than you would expect in some of these counties like Northampton that John was showing you there. So again, right now, Jake, the early vote makes up roughly half, and we think it's going to make up a lot less than that at the end of the day.
All right, yeah, so disproportionately Democratic, disproportionately early vote.
Right. Still, if you're the Democrats, you know that you understand this dynamic, right? So you know you need to run it up. So what you're doing in Fetterman campaign headquarters is saying, okay, this is not contextual, as in it's not final, but what did we need in Lackawanna County, right? Is that what we needed in the early vote? Is that anywhere the percentage we thought we needed in the early vote? That's what's going on in the headquarters now. They understand there's a long way to go, and the numbers are going to change, and the percentages are going to change. But they do know what their target was in every county. So that's what you're going through as this vote comes in. You say, are we close to our targets? Now, the polls are closed. It's too late to do anything about it. But that's how they get a sense in the campaign of, okay, now what do we have to look for as we move on through the night? And so that, if you're the Democrat, you're looking here, Allegheny County, again, this is the part of the state where Fetterman lives. He lives out here in Braddock right here. So again, you're about half of the vote. As David just noted, when the election day vote comes in, that is what in Pennsylvania they counted that. We got a lot of that early in 2020. Remember, and Trump took a big early lead. And then my biggest fascination about this race is when I was out here a couple weeks back in the Pittsburgh suburbs, the more upscale Pittsburgh suburbs. They were asking. A lot of them voted for Trump the first time. Then didn't vote for Trump the second time because they didn't like the chaos. They didn't like the tweets. They didn't like the noise. They didn't like being told to ingest bleach. And so you're out here in these areas here. You're still in Allegheny County, but you're out here. The people who made George W. Bush president and George H.W. Bush president, and they were asking me, what do you know about Dr. Oz? And I was saying, not that much, just what I see on TV. They were trying to figure out, is he a Trump? Because then they were not going to vote for him. Or is he just taking the Trump endorsement, and when he gets to the Senate, he'd be a more moderate Republican? So that's one question for Oz. How does he do out here? And then the other question for Oz is, how does he do here? right? How does he do? This is Trump country. This is where Trump loved his big rallies in Butler County.
Right.
And you come out here. So, again, it's 20% of the vote. So can Mehmet Oz match Donald Trump in the Trumpy parts of Pennsylvania, percentage-wise, and then with suburban voters there, and again, I'll come back here closer to your birthplace, suburban voters here, that's just not a contextual number yet because it's early. Can Mehmet Oz thread the needle? Get Trump voters to embrace him, but get suburban Republicans to say, he's not that much like Trump, I can vote for him. We have a long way to go before we know that, but that's the question.
And you've heard Oz, in the closing weeks of the campaign, try to paint himself as a Pennsylvania Republican, a liberal, more moderate Republican, talking about how he wants to go to Washington to fight against the extremes on the left and the right. Did he convince people in the collar county in the collar counties like Bucks County, Montgomery County, Delco, et cetera, that he meant it? Or did he undermine that when he appeared at a rally with Doug Mastriano and Donald Trump on the other side of the Commonwealth?
Right. Or if you're conflicted by that, when you have to actually check the box, how do you settle that conflict, right? In the sense that you know it better than I do. I mean, we don't have any votes in Montgomery County yet, but this is where his last event was in Montgomery County. Just over. This is Lehigh County. So it's blue-collar Lehigh County, the most blue-collar of the suburbs, Bucks County, the more upscale Montgomery County. His event was right here, sort of at the verge of all these key counties there. And that's where he was saying, I'll be balanced, I'll be more of a moderate voice. Well, those are the people who elected Arlen Specter. Those are the people who elected Dick Thornburg governor. Those are the people who elected Tom Ridge, who's from this end of the state and Erie, as their governor. Pragmatic, common sense. And they're the people who the margins, they didn't vote. Pat Toomey didn't carry their counties. He did carry Bucks, didn't carry Montgomery. They're the people who made Pat Toomey senator, the margins in the suburbs.
I want to walk you over to the House in a sec, but one other thing. I was talking to a top Democrat in Pennsylvania today, and he said the other thing for us to look at, since this is it's anticipated to be a tight race between Fetterman and Oz, is does Fetterman outperformed Shapiro and Biden in Scranton and in Harrisburg. Now, Scranton is Trump won Scranton, even though it's the birthplace of Joe Biden. He won the county. But because Fetterman does have this statewide name and ID and image as a blue-collar Democrat, does he outperform? Again, he won't win Scranton, but does he improve the margins?
So if you come back to 2020 in the presidential race, Biden actually carried the county.
Oh, he did carry the county.
The county, because of this. You get out here, you're right. The precincts up here tend to be more Trumpy, but he did carry it. He did carry it in 2020. But you raised the key point in the sense that what Fetterman is trying to do, I was talking about what needle does Oz have to thread here. What Fetterman is trying to thread, no, we skipped into the House.
Let's come back here to the Senate.
Right. What the needle Fetterman is trying to do is run it up in the blue areas and then cut into the Trump support in places. This is Latrobe. Latrobe is here, where Oz was at the rally. Fetterman lives right here. So he wants to be the guy who can, yes, get blue-collar Democratic votes, but also get those blue-collar Republican votes, the white working-class voters who've abandoned the Democrats. So I talked about the needles Oz wants to thread. You raised the other one, which is can Fetterman cut into the Trump base a little bit by saying, hey, I'm one of you. That's his whole thing about I'm one of you. Fetterman, Oz is from New Jersey. You want to vote for me because I understand your issues. I have a steel town outside my window, a steel plant outside my window, which happens to be true in Fetterman's case in Braddock. And so that's his needle. And we're a couple hours away from having a good sense of that.
We'll figure out if that works or not. Let's talk, Ben, again about competitive seats, because we're looking at 82 competitive seats. Of the 82, 47 of them, the voting has ended, and they are too early to call. 47 of them. Democrats are leading in 34 of those 47 competitive seats. Republicans are leading in 13 of the 47 competitive seats. Again, we know right now that a lot of what we're seeing is the early vote. But let's talk about these competitive races.
Right, and if that kind of math holds up, Democrats at home would say 47 to 13. That's great. It's good, and it would defy historical averages. But that would still, if that math holds up right there, when you're calling the races, then you still have a narrow, a Republican majority because they only need a net gain of 5. But if you're looking as we go through the night, and you're Democrats, and you're saying, okay, where are we now as opposed to where we were earlier, you just look. Jared Golden has pulled into the lead in Maine. Again, this district has ranked choice voting. It could be days and longer, much longer, before we get a final result. But again, if you're a Democrat and you're thinking this is one of those districts they were going to take from us, at the moment, Jared Golden has pulled into the lead. We're going to move south to New Hampshire, 2 competitive districts, both with Democratic incumbents here. And you have the Democratic incumbent. We're still only at 20% of the vote here, so we have a long way to go. But the Democratic incumbent leading here and leading here. If these 3 seats are red when we're done, then Republicans are going to have a big majority. If the Democrats can hold them, number one, they have hopes of defying history and keeping the majority, or they think they can get to a more narrow majority. So now we're going to come down to the state of New York, and you see the competitive districts here. And again, we have a ways to go in the count, but you see these competitive districts, most of them are red. You drop down south, where we just were in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we know this is the early vote from what we just went through for Senate and for governor. But the 4 competitive districts here, Democrats leading at the moment. Republicans hope to pick up 2 or 3 of these seats. So we'll see how the night plays out. And you keep dropping south. I was earlier, let me stay up this way for 1 second, because we told you earlier, the Republican was leading at one point. The Democrat moved into the lead about 15 minutes ago. Seth Magaziner has stretched that lead out a bit, and you're now up to about 87% of the vote. So you see the Democrat ahead there, 51% to 47% if you round that up. A ways to go yet here. But the map, if you were worried tonight for the Democrats, you were going to see a bloodbath. You don't see it in the map now, Jake, with some time to go. But you still have to say advantage Republican when it comes to capturing the net 5 to take the House.
All right, John King, thanks so much. And we have some projections for you right now. CNN has 3 projections. One of them is a pretty significant one. CNN is projecting that incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet will be reelected, defeating Joe O'Dea. Republicans had a lot of hopes that Joe O'Dea was going to be able to pick off Bennet in purple Colorado. They fell short, which indicates that this is not necessarily going to be the kind of night, the kind of great night Republicans were expecting. 2 other projections in Maryland. The Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen will be reelected, CNN projects, defeating Chris Chafee, a Republican. And in North Dakota, CNN is projecting that former governor and current Senator John Hoeven will be reelected, defeating Democrat Katrina Christensen. The balance of power in the U.S. Senate, as you know, 100 Senate seats. Democrats currently have 40. Republicans currently have 40. There are 20 seats remaining. That's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the night and perhaps a few more days after that. Republicans, of course, remember, need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. We have governor's races, of course, now as well, and Boris Sanchez has some projections there.
Jake, a trio of projections and 3 victories for Democrats, beginning with history being made in Maryland. Wes Moore, who had never been elected to public office in his life, will become the first black governor of the state of Maryland as he defeats election denier Dan Cox. Another historic win in Massachusetts for Democrats, Maura Healey. In another pickup for Democrats, she becomes the first woman elected governor of Massachusetts and the first openly lesbian governor in the history of the United States as she defeats election denier Jeff Deal. Meantime, the first openly gay governor in U.S. history will win re-election in Colorado. Jared Polis defeats Heidi Ganahl, a Republican entrepreneur. We also have some key race alerts to bring you right now, beginning with the state of Georgia. We've not stopped talking about Georgia all night. We will continue talking about these races. Brian Kemp right now, 204,000 votes ahead of Stacey Abrams, roughly a 7 percentage point advantage, with 72% of the vote in the Peach State. Let's get a look at Texas now. There, incumbent Republican Greg Abbott with a similar lead, 282,000 votes ahead of former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, 56% of the vote in the state of Texas. An update now from Michigan. This tough re-election battle for incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer. She stands roughly in the same place where she was when we last checked in on Michigan, a 40,000 vote advantage against former TV host and conservative commentator Tudor Dixon, only 13% of the vote in Michigan. Let's take a look at a true toss-up. Joe Biden won the state of Wisconsin in 2020 by an eyelash, only about 20,000 votes. Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat right now, holding on to a 76,000 vote advantage over Tim Michels with 21% of the vote in Wisconsin. We want to send it over to Dana Bash now, who has some analysis for us. Dana.
Thanks so much, Boris. And that number that you showed in Wisconsin, there are so many races there that we're watching tonight, such a battleground. But let's go back to the pair of firsts that Boris was talking about, governor's mansions. You're going to have a Democrat in the governor's mansion again, and in Maryland, Massachusetts and Maryland. Yeah. Maryland is, because we're local, we see the signs everywhere. Talk about Westmore and the importance of it.
Well, look, there's a lot of history that could be made tonight. I think these are two big ones, but especially for Democrats in Massachusetts, the first openly gay governor in that state, but the first lesbian in the entire country. There could be actually a second tonight if Tina Kotek wins in the state of Oregon. But that's a significant moment for the state of Massachusetts, that governor's mansion returning to Democrats. But in Maryland, in Westmore, I think what you're seeing there is someone who Democrats agree is perhaps the future of the party, a huge rising star, someone who, as Boris said, has never held public office before, taking over that governor's mansion from a very popular Republican governor. I think that's definitely one place I would be watching.
Yeah, there's no question. We obviously here in Washington, we've seen a lot of the ads for Westmore, an enormously impressive candidate. I agree with you. He's going to have a national profile. What's so interesting, these are two deep blue states, Maryland and Massachusetts, and for the last 8 years, both of them have been governed by moderate Republicans, Larry Hogan and Charlie Baker, both very popular, but both Healy and Moore were advantaged by the fact that they had hard right candidates who were strongly against abortion, strongly for Trump, and one of them said that Pence was a traitor. The other one said the 2020 election was rigged. That kind of politics from a Republican isn't going to work in Maryland and Massachusetts.
Yeah, no question. And the resume that Westmore has is just stellar. He was a veteran from Afghanistan in the 82nd Airborne. But I want to go back to Maura Healey and Massachusetts, because I'm sorry, when you think about it, the history-making moment of her being the first openly lesbian, okay. But the first woman, there's never been a female governor in Massachusetts?
It is amazing. I mean, it is amazing. And Massachusetts is not the only place where that is a piece of history that has not happened. I mean, there are a lot of places in this country, but especially when you look at these statewide contests where it is still a barrier to reach for women to be elected to those positions, for Black people to be elected to those positions. I believe Westmore would be only the third Black governor that's been elected in this country. So since Reconstruction, I should say. So there are a lot of barriers that we thought we had gotten past that people are still breaking in 2022.
No, and you're exactly right about Westmore. I mean, the first Black governor of Maryland, another deep blue state. A few barriers being broken tonight. We may see how the national race goes, but in a couple of very blue states, a couple of very impressive blue candidates.
Okay, back over to Jake.
Thanks so much, Dana. Coming up, the first results from Senate races in Nevada and Utah that could be key to the fight for Senate control. Our election coverage continues in just a moment. Stay with us. It's election night in America, and we're getting deeper into this incredibly important night in America. Just minutes from now, we are going to get more results. But until then, let us start with the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. 40 Democrats in the U.S. Senate, 40 Republicans in the U.S. Senate. 20 seats are remaining. Remember, Republicans need to pick up one net Democratic seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. The balance of power right now in the House of Representatives. 75 Democrats, 129 Republicans, including 3 pickups. 231 seats are remaining. 218 seats are needed to control the House of Representatives. The state of play right now, when it comes to the House of Representatives, when it comes to competitive seats, there are 48 seats where the polls have closed, and CNN has said it is too early to call. Of those 48, Democrats are in the lead in 37. Republicans are in the lead in 11. There are 82 competitive seats total. That is the state of play as of now, especially as those early votes are being tabulated. Just minutes from now, at 10 p.m. Eastern, polls are going to close in Nevada, in Utah, and Montana. Both parties aiming for the magic number of 218, the total number of seats needed to control the U.S. House of Representatives. 11 House seats are at stake in the next hour. Every seat matters in this heated battle for the House. 4 of those seats are considered competitive in this next round of poll closings. Turning to the battle for the U.S. Senate, it really could all come down to Nevada. Incumbent Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, the first Latina U.S. Senator ever, is also one of the most vulnerable Democrats in the U.S. Senate. She faces a strong challenge by the former state attorney general, Republican Adam Laxalt. In the Utah Senate race, Republican Senator and Trump loyalist Mike Lee was facing a heated challenge by an independent candidate, former CIA officer Evan McMullin. McMullin is an anti-Trump former Republican who ran for president in 2016. The clock is ticking closer to the end of voting in 3 more states. And when those votes come, we will bring them to you. Let's go to Gary Tuckman now. He is in Nevada at a voting location in Las Vegas. And Gary, you've seen a surge of late voters?
A surge of late voters, and I'll go this far, Jake, to tell you this. I've covered a lot of midterm elections. I've never seen a line this long at a voting place for a midterm election. This is Las Vegas, Nevada. This is the Boulevard Mall, about a 5-minute drive away from the Las Vegas Strip. And right now, I just finished counting, there are 250 people in line. Polls close officially at 7 p.m. Pacific time in about 8 minutes. But if you're in line before 7 p.m., you will be permitted to vote. We talked to the person in the front of this line. They said they waited an hour. When we talked to that person, it was 10 minutes ago. More people have come in. So this poll can be open for another hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. One other thing we want to tell you about results here in the state of Nevada, there are 17 counties. Each of the, including this one, Clark County, where more than 70% of Nevada's population lives. We have been told that until all 17 counties have processed their votes, none of them are to report their votes to Carson City, the state capital. So the results will all come out at once when all 17 counties are done. So that could take a long time. So the polls close officially in 7 minutes, but we should not expect results coming for a long time because of what I just told you.
I can't believe you were walking in that line the entire live shot. That is indeed a long line. Let's go to Sarah Seidner, who is in Phoenix, Arizona, Maricopa County, getting a sense of what's going to happen there. Obviously, Sarah, you've been reporting on some of the problems that have been happening in Maricopa County. How are things now?
We're told that all of those problems have been resolved, but as you know, the polls did close at 7 p.m., and we have heard from the chairman of the County Board of Supervisors, who apologized for the problems that happened earlier in the day, but said that every single vote will be counted. Rest assured. He wanted to make sure that voters knew that very clearly. In about 6 minutes, we are going to have some of those first results just rolling in. And remember that in this county, about 85% of people vote early. And so those vote counts that you start hearing in just a bit here are going to be from early voters, people who came to the polls before today or who mailed in their ballots as well. And so that is what you're going to start hearing. By Friday, we should have all of the early votes, about 95 to 99% of those votes counted, and we will know what those numbers are, according to officials here. One thing I do want to stress is we asked the chairman of the County Board of Supervisors whether or not those issues, those tabulation issues with the printers that happened here in several different voting centers were going to make this count last longer, and the answer was no. This should be as per normal. Jake?
All right, Sarah. Is that Mr. Gates from the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors right next to you, Sarah?
That is, and we were hoping to bring him in live. If you have some time, we would like to do that, if you wouldn't mind.
We'll come back later. Tell him we said hi. We'll come back and get a status report from him. Let's get more on Arizona right now from Brianna Keeler at the voting desk. Brianna.
Yeah, let's take a closer look here, Jake. A judge in Maricopa County, which of course is where Phoenix is located, denying a request from Republicans to extend polling hours by 3 hours. The judge saying there was no evidence that anyone was prevented from exercising their right to vote. That hearing wrapping up just 2 minutes before polls closed in Arizona. Republicans had asked for this extension after machines at 60 of the county's 223 locations were rejecting those ballots earlier. And election officials said that technicians had fixed the problems, that the ballots would still be counted even if they weren't tabulated by the machines that were affected. But the technical difficulties, of course, have stoked right-wing conspiracy theories about voting machines on social media. And the chief election official, as you heard Sarah talking about there, tweeting, every legal vote will be tabulated, adding, I promise, and we will see some of these official numbers from Maricopa coming here in just minutes by 10 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Brianna, thanks so much. Voting is about to end, but before we talk about those races, let's get a sense of the landscape here, the U.S. Senate. And if we can, if you'll permit me, could you take me to Georgia?
I can take you to Georgia, which has just turned red. Herschel Walker, again, we talked earlier about look for a seesaw here because this race is so competitive. Herschel Walker now 2,970 votes ahead of the Democratic incumbent, Senator Raphael Warnock. Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, getting just shy of 2% of the vote. That could be quite significant in the sense that at the moment, 76% of the estimated vote counted. So we have a ways to go, considerable ways to go, but 49.1 to 49%. That's essentially a dead heat with a very slight Walker lead. I just want to show you one interesting dynamic in this state as Walker now has pulled into the lead. If you look at the governor's race, it's not that close, right? You see an 8-point lead there for the incumbent Republican governor. Right.
Brian Kemp up 251,000 votes.
So watch this when we come back to the Senate race, right? So you're
2,000, right? Almost 3,000.
So you're looking through each of the counties here across the great state of Georgia. Watch when we pull this up just to give you a sense. Where are the counties where Herschel Walker is underperforming Governor Kemp? That would be almost everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, that would be almost everywhere. So what is happening? Number one, Governor Kemp. Let me turn this off and come back to the governor's race for a minute. Governor Kemp is overperforming Herschel Walker where Democrats live and where votes overwhelming. You might say he's getting blown out here. Yes, he is. He is getting blown out here. But margins matter in close races. So look at Brian Kemp with 28% of the vote in Fulton County, the most populous county in the state. County Joe Biden won by 46 points, more than 46 points. Brian Kemp's getting 28%. Herschel Walker's getting 23%. 23%. So that's where in terms of where the people live in a Democratic area, in a large area, that's one way to look at it. But it's also happening out here. I'm just going to pick a random rural county in Georgia. This is Wilcox County. It's tiny. It's less than 1% of the vote. But look at Herschel Walker getting 74% of the vote there, and Raphael Warnock getting 25%. If you round that up, then you come over here to the governor's race. Brian Kemp getting a point or two higher, and Stacey Abrams lower. So Raphael Warnock is getting a few more votes in these very white rural counties. He's overperforming Stacey Abrams in these areas. It makes a difference in a close race. You might say it's only 50 votes here or 100 votes there. When you get in the governor's race, is not close, so you say, oh, it doesn't matter. When you get here, and Raphael Warnock, during this conversation, Senator Warnock is now pulled ahead by 5,491 votes. So as these votes come in, the margins matter. The fact that Governor Kemp is doing a little better in the strongly Democratic areas matters big time in his race. And the fact that Herschel Walker in these red counties all across Georgia is running a little bit behind the Republican incumbent Governor Jake, it matters. The margins matter.
It sure does, John King. Thanks so much. Voting is about to end in 3 more states, including Nevada, another key battleground that could tip the scale in the fight for the control of the U.S. Senate. We have a key race alert for you now. It is too early to call the U.S. Senate race in Nevada between Senator Cortez Masto and Mr. Laxalt, Adam Laxalt. It is too early to call. We do not have any information for you there to project. In terms of Utah, between incumbent Republican Senator Mike Lee and his challenger, independent Evan McMullin, also too early to call. The balance of power in the U.S. Senate, as we've been telling you all night, this is key. There are 40 Democratic senators, 40 Republican senators, 20 seats outstanding. That is what we are going to be spending the rest of the night focusing on. Republicans need to pick up 1 net seat in order to regain control of the U.S. Senate. But right now, it's tied 40-40. Boris Sanchez now has a projection at the governor's desk. Boris.
Yeah, Jake, a trio of projections to bring you. In all of them, Republican incumbents hanging on, including in the state of South Dakota, where Democrats have not elected a governor since the 1970s. There, Kristi Noem earns another 4 years, defeating Jamie Smith. She is someone that potentially has presidential, if not vice presidential, aspirations for 2024. An update now, a projection from the state of Oklahoma. There, Kevin Stitt getting a big boost from national Republicans late in the game, a big influx of cash there. He defeats Democratic challenger Joy Hoffmeister to earn a return trip to the governor's mansion in Oklahoma. An update now from the state of Vermont. In a state that Joe Biden won by a considerable margin, Republican Governor Phil Scott earns another 4 years. He is the only Republican holding on to statewide office in that state as he defeats progressive educator Brenda Siegel. A number of key race alerts to bring you now. Beginning in the state of Texas, Republican incumbent Greg Abbott building on his lead. He's now 368,000 votes ahead of Beto O'Rourke with 58% of the vote in the Lone Star State. Let's get a look at Michigan right now. Gretchen Whitmer roughly the same place, maybe a slimmer advantage than the last time we checked in on her contest with Tudor Dixon. 36,000 votes ahead for the Democratic incumbent with 16% of the vote in. An update now, again from Georgia. Brian Kemp there, 247,000 votes ahead of Stacey Abrams. Notable in this rematch, last time around, Kemp only won by about 50,000 votes. This is a much bigger lead, and as you just saw, he added another 1,000 votes to that advantage with 77% of the vote in Georgia. We finish with Wisconsin. The key race alert there, 85,000 votes separating these two candidates. Tony Evers, the incumbent, holding on to an advantage over election denier Tim Michels, 35% of the vote in Wisconsin. And as we turn it over to Casey Hunt, we have to point out there's also a big Senate race in Wisconsin as well.
There sure is, Boris. And we're going to walk across the map here. I want to start, take a guess, Georgia, which is where we've been talking about all night. Raphael Warnock back in the lead by 0.1%. Look at that, 2,300 or so votes separating Warnock from Herschel Walker at this hour. We've got 77% of the vote in, but I think it's very obvious to everybody watching this could go either way. Let's take a look at Wisconsin. We obviously just saw what Boris was pointing out. It's similar on the Senate side. Mandela Barnes, the Democrat, sitting at 51.8%, but that is not as strong as the gubernatorial candidate, Ron Johnson, the incumbent Republican, at 48%. We expect this to be one of the closest Senate contests throughout the night. We've only got 34% of the vote in, so keep watching that one. Pennsylvania, let's check back in. This has changed pretty dramatically since the last time we really looked at it. John Fetterman is now at 52.1% to Mehmet Oz's 45.4%. This is starting to look a lot more like we expect it to look as they count the votes, perhaps over the next couple of days, depending on how close it remains. Right now, about 146,000 votes separating them. Fetterman has been underperforming the Democratic candidate in the governor's race, Josh Shapiro, so another thing to keep an eye on. Let's check in on Ohio, where J.D. Vance has expanded his lead a little bit over Democrat Tim Ryan, the congressman who's challenging him. This is, of course, retiring Republican Rob Portman's seat, so if Vance can hang on to this lead, it'll represent a Republican hold, 53.4% to Ryan's 46.6%. We still do, of course, have about 30% of the vote outstanding there. Now let's go down to North Carolina, where Ted Budd is still leading Democrat Sherry Beasley, 50.8% to Sherry Beasley's 47.1%. Retiring Republican Richard Burr has this seat right now, so this would represent a Republican hold. This has been pretty steady for the past couple of hours, but the vote count creeping upward. We're now at 83% in North Carolina. And let's check back in New Hampshire. This is one that a lot of people were looking to for signs of potentially an early Republican wave if Don Bolduc, the Republican, had a particularly strong showing. So far, that's just not happening. Maggie Hassan is at 57.2%, Bolduc down at 41.5%. Now, granted, we still only have about 40% of the vote in there, so things could still change. But I will say Democrats are saying good things about New Hampshire right now on the Senate side, Jake.
Well, it's a nice state. Of course they're saying nice things. Let's take a look at the balance of power right now in the competitive seats. Remember, we're looking at 82 competitive House seats. We're not going to look at all 435. There are 82 competitive ones. Of those 82, there are 51 competitive seats that we think are too early to call. Right now, in those 51, Democrats are leading in 39 of them. Republicans are leading in 12 of them. It's early. We do not know that this is going to be determinative. But this is certainly, if you're a Democrat watching at home, better news than what a lot of Republicans were hoping for at this point in the night. Let's go over to the magic wall right now. John King, let's take a look. And if you don't mind my asking, there is a little county, a little district in Virginia, of the three that we're watching in Virginia, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger's district. And I'm wondering, it's changed to blue.
It has changed to blue, and we talked about earlier what was happening. 3 competitive districts in the Commonwealth of Virginia, excuse me. The Republicans hope to pick up all 3. They thought maybe they could get 2. The Wexton race we called a little earlier, that's the most Democratic. She's winning comfortably. So then we come down, and again, Washington, D.C. is here. We come down to the Spanberger race. She is now pulled ahead, narrowly ahead, but 4,863 votes with 98% of the vote in, estimated vote in. So still some counting to do. So what happened here? Remember last time we were here, we didn't have many votes from Prince William County. This is the largest population base in the district. It also happens to be the most Democratic area, closest to Washington, D.C.
And look at this.
Yes,
89, but it's still 11% outstanding.
Still more votes to come from the most Democratic area of the district. Joe Biden carried this county by 32 points. And there you have it right there. She's carrying it by 32, 33 points. So this county performing. So when you pull back out, again, Democrats are looking at these House races filling in, and what you do see is the Democrats are very competitive. Is it enough to keep a Republican majority? That's a much bigger question, and we'll walk through the night because Republicans only need a net gain of 5. But in terms of Democrats fighting tough in the competitive districts, you see it right here. A lot of red here in the district as you look for Vega, but the largest population center of the district is right here. And so, again, we have to finish the count here, but we're up to 98%. You come out, I just want to come down south to the Loria district, which is this is the much more competitive district. She has narrowed. Loria has narrowed this, but she's still down 9 points or 10 points if you round up the Republican candidate, Jen Kiggins. It's gotten a little bit tighter as things have come in. You're seeing it on the county level here as it breaks up throughout the district. This will be an area people study after the election, right in the Virginia Beach area just south of Norfolk. But you come back up. I want to come back to the House competitive map. Again, if you're Democrats and Republicans looking at Virginia saying, we're going to get at least 2 of those 3, at the moment you're thinking, okay, maybe we can keep it to just 1. This is a footnote I want to make because it's early. I don't want to draw any conclusions here, but this district has gotten a lot of attention in recent days because Sean Maloney is not just a Democratic incumbent from New York. He's the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He's the head of the fundraising arm to help Democrats try to keep the majority. At the moment, he's losing in his district. I want to turn off the county line for a minute just to show you the district here. You're in the Hudson Valley, a little bit northwest of New York City, losing at the moment, but it's only 9%. So this is one of those races. Republicans would love this. They consider this, if they can get it, a trophy because he's the campaign committee chairman. But it is very, very early. And again, in the other competitive districts in New York, early for them too. So that could change, but Democrats ahead. Democrats still holding both in New Hampshire. Democrats holding that seat in Rhode Island I talked about. We're not done yet, but they're leading. Democrats, this is another one we haven't talked about all night long. Republicans were hoping to pick up, you talked about New England earlier, hoping to pick up a Democratic seat in Connecticut. Only 10% of the vote, but the Democratic incumbent ahead at the moment.
Vice President Kamala Harris was dispatched to Western Connecticut a few weeks ago, early October, to buck up Democratic turnout in this area, and it's only 10%, but still, right now, Democrats holding it.
10%, and it's early vote, and so that's one of the reasons. Again, we've been urging patience all night, but if you look at the map right now, you see these are the 82 competitive seats, and you're seeing, again, these races aren't called. That's a very important point to make. Most of them are not called, but you're seeing a lot of blue. If you're the Democrats, you're thinking, okay, at least at the moment, this Republican bragging about a big red wave, this map is incomplete. We're not done. We haven't called these races. But if you're looking now, you don't see it. Can you get a Republican majority here? Yes, you can.
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, you can. But do you see, you don't see 30 seats looking at this map. And we'll know a lot more 2 hours and 3 hours and into the morning than we will now. But again, we'll see if this one holds up. This is an incredibly competitive race for a Democrat. He has a narrow lead here, 27% in. Again, ranked choice voting kicks in here. So this one's going to take a long time to finish the count. But if you're going into ranked choice voting, you'd still rather be the guy with the most. And I just want to check where we are in the vote count here in New Hampshire, because again, the Republicans really thought maybe, especially with the governor, Chris Sununu, coasting to re-election, that they could pick up at least one of these, and Custer holding on as we're up to 27% here. Chris Pappas leading much more narrowly. This is the more competitive district. This one here, you move up into the North Country, this is more Republican territory. 24%, it's more competitive. So we have a long way to go in counting that one. But you pull back out to the map, and so North Carolina, we have some competitive seats here. The Democrats at the moment, I just want to check, leading here, 91%. So that, you're looking to hold. And you come here. This is a fascinating race here in the sense that.
Oh my goodness! Look at this. 74% in, and Wiley Nickel is up.
Up 11,000 votes. But again, remember what happened in the Senate race there as well when the day of votes came in. So we have to wait and see. But again, if you're looking at the map and you're a Democrat, you're thinking, you were worried. You were worried if an incredibly bad night would be Republicans cutting into you, especially in the Northeast, which has been traditionally blue Democratic territory for some time. And the map, it's not great for Democrats, but it's certainly not bad in the sense that when I say not great, again, the margins here.
Right.
Democrats have no margin for error in the Senate, and a tiny, tiny margin of error in the House, meaning how many seats can we lose. But if you're looking at this map right now and you're Democrats, you don't see the blowout here. Incomplete. A lot of votes to count still.
Right. I guess the most accurate thing you could say is there are a lot of Democrats in Washington, D.C. that were holding on their breath, thinking that there was going to be a lot more red in this map right now in the night than there is.
And here's an example of it here. Again, just to come out, we're up to 65% now. We were talking about this earlier when Tim Ryan, the Democrat, was leading in the early count in the Senate race. We knew that was early vote, and we kept saying we need to wait. We now know that, you know, the Republican candidate in the Senate race has passed and taken the lead. So here's Marcy Kaptur in a district the Republicans who control the governor's office and the legislature redrew her district at 65% of the vote. Still a ways to go, and you're still the Republicans benefit from the election day vote, so we're still not there. But if you're Marcy Kaptur, one of the hardest working Democrats, not taking partisan sides, she works the district hard. She goes home, and you're looking, this is all new territory for here, way out here. And at the moment, if you break it down by county, you take a look at the district. This tells you, you know, this is when they redrew the district, they added this. So it's just they're interesting to watch, Jake, as we go through. Still a lot of counting to go, but more blue than Republicans had hoped on the map at this moment.
All right, John. And CNN has some projections for you right now in the U.S. House. 1 Democrat, 3 Republicans. CNN is projecting the Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the winner in Virginia's 7th congressional district. She's a former CIA case officer. She's criticized her party for moving too far to the left. This was a seat that Republicans hoped to pick up. They failed to do so, CNN projects. Republican State Senator Jen Kiggans has, however, flipped a Southern Virginia district. She defeated incumbent Congresswoman Elaine Luria, who serves on the January 6th committee. That is one of the Republican pickups they were hoping for this evening. Republican and emergency room Dr. Rich McCormick has, CNN projects, flipped a Georgia seat that was gerrymandered to become more Republican. He's a Marine veteran who served in Afghanistan. In addition, in New York, Republican Nicole Maliotakis has been reelected in New York's 11th congressional district, which includes Staten Island and part of Brooklyn. It was a rematch of her 2020 win over Democrat Max Rose. Let's look at the balance of power right now in the U.S. House of Representatives. 81 Democrats in the House, 145 Republicans, including 5 pickups. There are 209 seats remaining to be called. You need 218 to control the U.S. House of Representatives. The state of play right now when it comes to those competitive seats, we've been telling you about these 82 competitive House seats all night. Democrats, well, let's start with Republicans. Republicans need to win 23 of the outstanding competitive seats. Democrats need to win 51 of the outstanding competitive seats. Anderson Cooper, I'm going to go to you right now with your panel. This is a suspenseful night. What's great about election nights is that at the end of the day, the polling and the prognostication and the pundits, at the end of the day, it's up to the voters. And the voters get their say, and sometimes they throw us a lot of surprises like tonight.
And that is what makes it exciting and what makes it a very long night, which is why we are going to be here for quite some time. I want to talk with the team here in New York about what's going on in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger winning, Elaine Luria losing. What does that say about where things are?
I'm happy about Spanberger because, you know, she's great, moderate, understands kitchen table issues, works hard, and it's a Biden +7 district. If she had gotten wiped out, you'd be very terrified for the rest of the night because if she can't hang on, who else is going to go down? The fact that she's still there, still standing, that she won, I think means, you know, that's very positive for Democrats.
Yeah, I think both Republicans and Democrats were looking at this as kind of a bellwether district. If she had gone down, that would have been very good news for Republicans. It doesn't mean that, I mean, there are races out west that are perilous for Democrats. We'll see how those go. But, you know, you see this, the race in Rhode Island, which I don't think has been called yet, has it?
No, but it was very
But
close.
it's been, that one was in jeopardy. That would have been a bad sign for Democrats that this was going to be a very deep defeat. That, you know, all I can tell you is I was in the White House in 2010 when the big wave rolled in. I know what it feels like. It doesn't feel like this. Even if Republicans take control of the House, it's not going to be a night like that where race after race after race went to the Republicans and a whole kind of crew of young Democrats were wiped out. You know, the Spanberger win tells me that's not what this night's going to be.
I just heard from someone at the White House who said that they're really relieved about Spanberger, and they feel like you do, David, that it doesn't feel to them like a wave. They're not happy.
Wait, they're judging that by one race?
Well, this was, as David said, sort of their bellwether. This is a district that was redistricted, became more blue, And the folks at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee have said that this kind of was the race that they were looking at, because if it were, a blowout and she really lost, they would know that it was going to be a bad night. I think no one's happy about Luria, who is on the January 6th committee and is very well regarded. And some folks believe that it was her service on the January 6th committee that really may have hurt her. We know that Liz Cheney came out and campaigned for Spanberger. So, I think Democrats feel like not the wave that they were so worried about. But again, we all have to say the evening is young.
It's 10:17 on
And-
this.
Is that all?
No,
Is that all?
Even though we've been here for a long time,
We've
it's
been
still
here
really early.
And also, if whether it's a wave, a ripple, or whatever you want to call it, if the Republicans do win the House, the oversight's going to feel all the same.
There's
no doubt.
If you're in the Biden cabinet, don't breathe easy.
But there is the matter of margin.
Well, also, let's just look at the Georgia race right now on the screen. I think it's like 700 and something votes separating, 748 votes separating Herschel Walker and Raphael.
But listen, I'm a little more optimistic here, right? Because at least, Walker's tending to do better on election day. We're looking at the graphic that we had up earlier about what percentage of election day votes are still outstanding is really big here. And I think that Walker's been slowly nibbling away. Scott has a theory here. As long as he's running close to
Well,
the governor here.
It's been about 4.5 point gulf between Walker and Kemp, and I've been kind of watching that number. The other number I've been watching is the Libertarian Oliver. He's at 1.9.
Yeah, 1.9. Libertarian has not broken 2, stayed down low.
Yeah, the Walker campaign's theory was that if they can keep Oliver below 2.5, then they might be able to avoid a runoff. So far, he's at 1.9. Obviously, incredibly tight margin on that.
Yeah.
But.
I mean, this, who knows? This looks like a prescription for a potential runoff here. And given the way, the Pennsylvania race is running true to form, looks very competitive. Democrats pick up that seat. This Georgia, this could be a biennial event. Georgia decides control.
We should also just point out now on the screen, Arizona, Mark Kelly in the lead right now with 56.4%. Blake Masters, 41.3%, but again, 41%.
We don't know Washington State.
Well, this evening feels like a mixed bag, and of course, it's actually early in the night, despite the fact that it may not feel like this. Of course, Florida, just a blowout for Ron DeSantis, winning by more than 8 points in Miami-Dade. That's huge for Republicans. But then some of the other seats that we were looking at as potential pickups, like New Hampshire, Bolduc at this time is trailing. It's not been called yet. We'll see as votes continue to come in. I tend to agree this may not be quite the wave that Republicans were anticipating. Do I think the House still goes to the right? Absolutely. But that Abigail Spanberger seat is significant.
The Arizona governor race on the screen now, 55% for Katie Hobbs, Carrie Lake, 44%, but again, 40%.
My point is the margin is really, really important in the House, because Kevin McCarthy knows that he needs to have enough of a majority so that Marjorie Taylor Greene and that Freedom Caucus doesn't have essentially
leverage on
him by the neck when it comes to the agenda there. And he has spent, his super PAC has spent like over $300 million trying to broaden the battlefield so that he'll have a larger majority. So actually, every one of these races that they were hoping to win that they don't get, even if they get the majority, which I still think is likely, makes his position more perilous in trying to run that caucus.
Can we just talk about Florida, because we really haven't had a chance to do that. I was texting with a source in Florida, political source, who pointed out to me that this will be the first time since Reconstruction that Florida won't have any Democrats in statewide office, period. So, and DeSantis's victory,
the message,
Miami-Dade.
Oh, the message that DeSantis sent tonight. I mean, this got called early, and Florida counts their votes quickly, so we won't be talking about it as we watch these other nail biters. The message that Ron DeSantis sent to the Republican Party tonight about what he's capable of, crushing up and down the state among the Hispanic counties where they have a lot of Hispanic votes, suburban voters, rural voters. When you talk about building a coalition to run a presidential campaign that could win, that's the message that DeSantis sent tonight. So to me, for 2024 implications, this crush, because if the rest of the country is a little bit more muddled and Florida crushes, think about the political message that sends about what should this party do?
I was going to say, sitting across the state at Mar-a-Lago, right? Curiously, I think former President Trump has to be watching that, looking at the margins.
Totally.
Governor DeSantis won the last election by 33,000 votes. I think barely winning. He won by, I think, 1.6 million right about now, so it still could grow or shrink a little bit, but a huge margin. And to Scott's point, the coalition of voters he's put together is something completely impressive that he'd need to put together to run, nationwide. He's done it here. He can replicate it again.
The other huge number he put together was money, and he's still got $90 million left to start his presidential race. So
yeah, this is as close to a mandate as Governor DeSantis is going to get. And I imagine every elected Republican is going to be calling him saying, you need to be the nominee.
And DeSantis tonight pointed out, we not only won the election, we have rewritten the political map, and he called his own win a win for the ages.
You say every Republican's going to be calling him and telling him
what did DeSantis say? Florida is where woke goes to die.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
and I will say, what he did during the campaign, he ran all over the country campaigning for all different kinds of Republicans, and he never made it about himself, unlike others. And look how he got rewarded by the Republicans. I'm telling you, what he put together and what his team did, it's really impressive.
Big night.
Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake?
All right, Anderson, thanks so much. I'm standing here at the Magic Wall, obviously, with Mr. King, taking a look at the U.S. Senate and what we got. We got 46 Democrats leading right now, 2 of them in Republican seats, 46 Republicans leading right now, 1 in a Democratic seat. Give us the lay of the land.
So one of the Democrats leading in a Republican seat is Mandela Barnes, the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, leading right now, 47% of the vote counted over the incumbent senator by a 30,000 vote margin. Remember, Donald Trump won this state by 20,000 votes. Then Joe Biden won this state by 20,000 votes. That is today's Wisconsin. It will be close, and you see all the gray. Those are mostly Republican areas, so we're still waiting for votes to come in. This is going to go. This is a very competitive race. Again, this is one of those races, though, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin, where you had Democratic candidates in traditionally red-leaning states in a midterm year. This one more of a battleground, who ran very competitive races, and we're going to keep counting votes there because Lieutenant Governor Barnes ran a very competitive race. This is a Democratic-held seat that is red at the moment because of Herschel Walker, who has stretched this out a little bit, but this has been a seesaw. 10 minutes ago, Senator Warnock was up by 647 votes. Then Walker was up by about 700 votes. Now Walker is up by 16,000 votes. You're seeing the map filling in. That's one of the reasons Walker's vote total has changed. You see a lot of these smaller counties. This one still has no votes. Coffee County, it's tiny. It's less than 1/2% of the statewide vote. But these are big Republican counties. So it's a couple hundred votes there, a couple thousand votes there. I'll just give you an example as you come over here. It doesn't look like a lot. But in a close race, you need them. And so that's what has happened recently. Some of these smaller rural counties have started reporting their vote, and Walker has come up. Again, if you look at this dynamic, this could matter. Right. That could matter because who's ever on top, you need 50% plus 1 vote to avoid a runoff. And so we got 20% of the vote to count. So that could change. One of these candidates could pull more significantly ahead. But this is a nail-biter at the moment. And just to come over and look, a very known quantity, the Republican incumbent governor at 54% with a 285,000 vote lead, if you round that up just a little tiny bit, right? So the well-known Republican quantity, the Republican incumbent governor with 54% of the vote, the newcomer, the untested in politics, Herschel Walker, running below 50% of the vote. So Brian Kemp helping, but not helping everywhere, if you will.
Yeah, and it's not just that Herschel Walker is untested in politics. Right. He's had a very rough campaign with all sorts of allegations about his personal life, about kids he's fathered and not been there for, and on and on and on. May I ask you, because I know you have this technology, can you show me where Herschel Walker is underperforming Brian Kemp, the governor?
Right, so you're looking at this, yes. And so just at home, if you help me, look at this map here. It will change. Whereas the counties that stay lit up are where Herschel Walker is underperforming.
Meaning the Republican governor is doing better and getting more votes than Herschel Walker.
That would be almost everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere.
1, 2, 3, 4 counties so far, and I think one of them hasn't reported any votes yet. So just
3, that just changed to 3.
Yeah, it's just changed to 3.
So almost everywhere.
Just about everywhere. So and so it matters. It matters enormously because if you come in here and you come Fulton County, it's Atlanta, it's the largest slice. There are 159 counties in Georgia, so it's a complicated state, but 10% of the population is right here. Atlanta, majority Democratic, without a doubt, overwhelmingly Democratic. Then you move out to the suburbs that are still predominantly Democratic, but there are Republican votes to be had, right? Herschel Walker's getting 23% of the vote there. Brian Kemp is getting 28% of the vote. That matters, and it matters hugely.
And let me also ask you, because first of all, I mean, Herschel Walker was running a base campaign. He was just trying to get Republicans out. Brian Kemp, who is a very conservative Republican, was also trying to appeal to Democrats and suburban voters. We see a similar difference in approach between Stacey Abrams, who was also running kind of a base campaign, a little less so than Herschel Walker, but versus Raphael Warnock, the incumbent senator, who was really highlighting work he'd done in a bipartisan way. Can you show me where Stacey Abrams is underperforming Senator Warnock?
Sure, I can. And I want to add to that point. You know, Stacey Abrams ran 4 years ago. Raphael Warnock has had to run 3 times, right? So this is a campaign that says, the question is, where is Abrams?
Just to explain this for people who are not in Georgia, the reason Raphael Warnock had to run 3 times is because he ran for the Senate in 2020. Nobody got above 50%. Right. So then he had to run again in January 2021, and now he's running again. So that's the 3rd time.
And he may have to run again in a month, December 6th. That's just the way it is. We'll see how this one plays out. So the question is, where is Abrams underperforming Warnock? And it's not in as many places, right? It's not in as many places because it's the percentages. It's the percentages. But
what do you mean it's not as many places?
If you come in and look at it, it's everywhere. In the sense that she's running behind him because nothing changes, right? So again, so the point. Sorry, I was distracted because the point I was going to make is you come in here and you think, okay, Senator Warnock's getting blown out here, right? And he is. But in close races, to your point about Brian Kemp, popular conservative governor, who's doing okay in the Democratic areas, okay.
Not horrific.
Right, not horrific, right? But he's doing okay. And then you come out here where Herschel Walker's getting 65%. You say, well, why are we talking about that, right? That's 30 points. That's 31 points. Well, we're talking about it because of this, because that's 35 points, right? It just a little bit matters, right? 5,971 votes for Stacey Abrams in this county. 6,200.
So, but that's 300 votes for Raphael Warnock that Stacey Abrams didn't get.
And it's 300 there, and then it's another couple hundred here, is what I'm saying. So in the very rural conservative areas of Georgia, Warnock's getting blown out, but by a not much, by a smaller margin. 20 votes here, 100 votes there matter. Now, it matters out here for the Democrats, and this is where it matters up here for the Republicans. Again, this is DeKalb County. Joe Biden won this county by 67 points, right? So you're not looking for this to be red tonight. It's not going to be red tonight. But you see Herschel Walker at just shy of 12%. 12% if you round that up.
Right.
The governor's running at 15%.
15%. Again,
that matters. 33,000 votes to 26,000 votes. In a close election, every single one counts.
So what's the overall right now? Because I want to bring in David Chalian at the Battleground Desk. Right now, it's 81% established have reported. Let's bring in David Chalian at the Battleground Desk to tell us, David, this 81%, where's it from, and where's the 19% we're waiting for coming from?
Right. So right now, Jake, Herschel Walker is in the lead. He's got that 1.645 million votes there. Raphael Warnock, 1,621,000 votes, 81% of the vote in. How much of this vote is pre-election vote? Right now, our estimate is 70% of it is pre-election vote, which we know Democrats have been participating in the pre-election vote in more robust numbers than Republicans. At the end of the day, we think that's going to drop down to 61%. So right now, there's more pre-election vote in the Georgia vote as a share than we think there will be at the end of the day. Now I want to break down specific method of voting and take a look at what's left uncounted here. So in the mail vote, where Raphael Warnock has a 36.9% lead, it's a big Warnock advantage category, there's still 26% of that mail vote uncounted. I'm going to add in early in person. Here, Warnock has an 8.5 percentage point lead over Walker, and there's only 5% counted. Now, these two buckets together, remember what I just said, make up what we think will be 61% of the overall electorate. The smaller piece is the election day vote, okay, down here. Now, that is a big Herschel Walker category. He's winning it by 27.2%, and there's still 42% of it uncounted. But remember, the top two categories, let me see if I can unhighlight, that is what we think is going to make up 61% of the vote. And the election day vote, which again, 42% is uncounted, we think that's going to make up at the end of the day about 39-40% of the vote in Georgia. This is why you're seeing such a close race right now.
It is a nail-biter. No idea what's going to happen here in Georgia.
No, and we didn't in the presidential race.
Yeah.
We did, and the runoffs were close.
Took a few days, right?
That's
in
why.
Georgia?
Yeah, yes, this is why we can go back in time and show it if you want. But this is why. I mean, if you go back to the, just instructive to go back to 2020. That's the Senate race. This is why we had a runoff, right? The Republicans.
Right. Neither of them achieved over 50, and at the end of the day, John Ossoff won.
Right, and so that's if we're at that point, it's not so much who's on top; it's which two go into the runoff. But if you want to come back to the presidential race, I mean, Joe Biden ends up winning the state by 11,779 votes. But if you go through it, this is Donald Trump took an early lead.
So what time are we at? We're at 10:30 right now Eastern.
Now we're at midnight as we're switching from Tuesday to Wednesday.
Right.
Trump is still in the lead as we switch it from Tuesday to Wednesday. Noon the next day, Donald Trump's still in the lead, starting to shrink a little bit. Then you get to 2 days later. 2 days later, from Wednesday to Friday.
That's when we were up to 99%.
Because they were counting all the mail-in votes during the COVID pandemic, right? And then Biden passes it.
Right. Now, they did change the law in Georgia so you could count the early votes. You could prepare them and you could count them. So they're not completely in the same boat as of now.
It won't take as long.
It won't take as long.
Yeah, it won't take as long this time. So let's come out of 2020. Let's close that
And when
down.
you're done with that, I want you to drive up I-95 and take me back home to Pennsylvania.
And then we'll come out of that. We'll come here, we'll get out of the House, we'll come back to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Okay, where are we
here?
here?
We'll see again as we get here, 57% of the vote, 106,000 vote lead, but still a very close race. That's 3 points and a little bit of change. And the question is, so then you start moving around, right? In the suburbs, only 36% of the vote. In Bucks County, Montgomery County was empty earlier, remember?
32%.
We're up to 32, about a third of the vote there. If that margin stays like that, David will interrupt if I'm wrong. But if that's early vote. There's just no way it's not because of the margin. Again, these are more competitive than this.
Right.
But if John Fetterman is winning Bucks County at the end of the night by a margin, that's 20 points.
That's a crazy margin,
that would
by
be,
the way. Bucks County is usually much, much closer.
Right, much more competitive. And this obviously is a Democratic county. Recently, Joe Biden was it by 26 points, but he doesn't win it by 60
Can you show
points.
me where the vote is outstanding, where we're waiting for the vote?
So that's the key point as you're waiting for the outstanding vote. You look, the larger the circle, the greater share of the outstanding vote, and the color of the circle is who is leading in that area right now. Does not mean who will win it in the end, but who is leading right now.
That's a lot of big blue bubbles, though.
Right. The bulk of the vote. Look, this race will come down to, can Mehmet Oz compete here? It's the same conversation we were just having in Georgia. Brian Kemp is not winning Fulton County. Brian Kemp is not winning DeKalb. He's not winning Cobb County, but he's getting a decent amount of votes. Mehmet Oz has to do it down here, Philadelphia, the collar counties around it. At the moment, Fetterman is leading, and we just looked, leading significantly.
Yeah.
The question is, and you see these other circles, these are Republican votes, right?
Sure.
And they're smaller counties, right?
Well,
They're
Erie's
smaller-
Erie's
not so
and
small.
right there is not so small.
As you come in, but if you're looking up here, the question is, can Mehmet Oz, the margin? It's the same thing about the margins we see in Georgia.
I want to go to Breonna Keeler if I can. She's at the voting desk. Breonna, where are the votes that we're waiting for here? And tell us the status of the counting in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so let's look at this because officials there are doing this marathon counting. That means that they're not stopping until all the ballots are counted. So no one's, going home in the middle of the night. They're going to keep this up, and we're going to be seeing these results coming into some key counties here. So, John, you can kind of walk us through some of this and give us a sense of what this is going to mean for the night unfolding ahead of us. In Philadelphia, we'd been told, of course, that these final results there could take days. We're now hearing that officials are going to tell us they'll do a press conference within the hour to update on their status. But of course, we don't know. Obviously, this is going to take some time with some of the measures that they're taking there to verify some of these ballots, right?
Well, Breonna, just remind people, because one of the things that happened in Philadelphia is that the Republicans made a move and are demanding Philadelphia election officials to take steps that they're not demanding of election officials in any other part of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And even the Republican commissioner was upset about what was going on. So let's
That's right. And
remind
in the
us,
end,
yeah.
and in the end, you had that Republican official joined also by a Democratic official, and they're going to go ahead and proceed with that verification of what they're seeing at the polls and cross-referencing these ballots. just to make sure that they don't have anyone challenging or that they should not be able to actually challenge. We'll see if that actually means no one does challenge what they're doing, but it just means it's going to add a lot of time to it. I want to head now to Berks County. So you see this here. Reading is obviously in Berks County. And so what we're looking here at the mail-in ballots, these are expected to be done here in a few hours. We're actually going to see these in-person votes by midnight. So brew a little coffee, but it's not too much farther ahead of us, right, where we're going to be getting some information about what's going on there.
Well, let me jump in for 1 sec, Brianna, because she makes the point that we have more ballots to count. Again, you're looking at margins, right? So Joe Biden wins this, Donald Trump wins this county by a little bit more, 8 points, right? So that's 6 points right there. The question is, can John Fetterman keep it that close? It's just one county, but you're looking at margins all across. But as Bree notes, we have some outstanding votes to count. Sorry to interrupt. Go.
Okay, so the other thing we're looking at, if we go to, okay, you're in Allegheny County now. Okay, so let's take a look at Allegheny County here. Obviously where Pittsburgh is. 90 to 95% of the results should be in by 11 p.m. And obviously Allegheny showing up first as you've been watching all of those results coming in. But we should be getting a really strong picture of what is happening there, where you can compare what John Fetterman is doing, obviously, to the gubernatorial candidate and get a sense of how things are going.
Yeah, and look, this was always going to be a nail biter, and it was always a very, very tight race, especially with, I think it's fair to say that Oz closed pretty strong.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, Fetterman is a known quantity, the lieutenant governor, and Oz. People talked about earlier about does it bother them? It was an exit poll. Does it bother them that Oz is a new resident of the state? As a Pennsylvanian, let me just say the issue wasn't just that he's a new resident of the state; it's that he was from Jersey. Which, if you're from Pennsylvania, that's not from Connecticut. That's a whole other thing. It means. But look, we'll see what happens. But Brianna, go ahead.
Okay, so let's look at Bucks County, heading to those suburbs that you were just checking out there outside of Philadelphia. 40,000 mail-in ballots now have been scanned. They're expecting all of the votes to be counted by midday tomorrow. Okay, so we've got some time ahead of us to find out what is happening there in Bucks.
It's an interesting point. Mail-in ballots. So in 2020, those were disproportionately Democrat. We don't know that they are this time.
Yeah.
Right? But in 2020, they were disproportionately Democrat. In Bucks County, I've been talking about this all night, but because it's so important, Pat Toomey wins Bucks County 6 years ago. He's reelected in a pretty competitive race to the United States Senate. Right, so this is very key. Again, so the mail-in ballots. If you look at the moment, if you look at the moment, that's a 20-point lead in Bucks County. If it's anywhere close to that at the end, John Fetterman is the next senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But we're only, so you're at 61%.
Fetterman may well win. He's not going to win Bucks County.
Yeah, you're at 61% statewide. It's just important. So in the places, Philadelphia and the suburbs, 61%, but only 36% here,
right,
which means you have a way to go. Right, 32% here. This is 6%, 6.5% of the state population. This is 5% of the state population, and you've got a lot of votes to count still. So this was Democrat 4.4. That would be outstanding. So we have ways to go. We're still counting. We're still counting votes now, and then Brianna talks about mail-in ballots that might not be counted till tomorrow. Remember, this was the state. Again, there aren't as many this time, and they're prepared to count them better this time.
Right.
But this was the state that took us until Saturday in the 2020 election.
Well, go ahead, Brianna.
I think we're going to see that again. We have the acting Secretary of State saying, be patient, because this is going to take a few days. So it sounds like it could very much be a repeat of that. And, we're going to be dying to see what's happening here, especially in Philadelphia, but we're just going to have to be patient.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that in 2020, Donald Trump was on the top of the ticket, and he was telling people, his supporters, do not vote by mail, do not vote early. Oz, to his credit, to his sanity, has not been saying that. And in fact, the way he won the primary, if memory serves, is that ultimately he beat a very strong challenge from Dave McCormick by beating him in the obviously in the total vote count, but that included early ballots.
Yes.
He wasn't telling people not to vote.
Right. That'll be one of the great case studies, again, when we're done with the count, the most important thing, who controls the Senate, who controls the House, what about these governor's races, as we get through all that, when we can do a closer analytical environment, look at the Ron DeSantis win in Florida, you know, Florida Republicans did much better in early voting this time than they did in 2020. The Kemp campaign says, I haven't looked at the data yet, the Kemp campaign says when you look there, they did better, even though Democrats are dominating the Georgia early voting, the Kemp campaign, again, on the margins, the Kemp. So it's just a simple question. With Donald Trump saying don't do it, just ask yourself this. Would you like a month to turn out your vote or 1 day to turn out your vote? I mean, what Donald Trump did to Republicans in 2020 was, forgive the word, asinine. Because he cost them the ability to have more time to turn out more votes. And in a digital age, the second you return your ballot or the day after, I know it, so I can move on to somebody else. You know, you're not wasting your money still texting Jake Tapper saying you need to vote. Your vote's cast, we know, we move on to the next one. The fact that Donald Trump took that away from Republicans in 2020.
No, I know it's an excellent point. We now have some news from Boris at the projection desk for governors.
That's right, Jake. A handful of projections to bring you, and in all of them, Republican victories beginning in Texas. Greg Abbott, the incumbent Republican, winning a third term, defeating former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Meantime, in the state of Iowa, another incumbent Republican defeating the Democratic challenger Kim Reynolds there, winning re-election against small business owner Deidre DeGier. We also have a projection to bring you from the state of Nebraska. Jim Pillen, a veterinarian who defeated a Donald Trump-backed candidate in the Republican primary. He becomes the next governor of Nebraska, defeating state legislator Carol Blood. And no surprises in the state of Wyoming, a state that Donald Trump carried with some 70 percentage points in 2020. Mark Gordon, the incumbent Republican there, defeats Teresa Livingston, an Air Force veteran. Let's get you some key race alerts now. And in 4 of these key races, the Democrat is leading an election denier. First, in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, the incumbent Democrat, she builds on the lead that she had when we last checked in on this race against Tudor Dixon, now sitting 112,000 votes ahead with 30% of the vote in the state of Michigan. An update now, Jake, from your home state, home Commonwealth maybe? Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General there, 430,000 votes ahead of Doug Mastriano with 62% of the vote in. Meantime, our first look at the Arizona governor's race with this key race alert. Katie Hobbs, the Secretary of State that helped certify the 2020 election results in Arizona, she's leading former TV anchor turned unrepentant election denier Kari Lake, 184,000 votes, half of the vote in the state of Arizona. Then in New York, a race that nobody expected would be as close as it was in polling right at the very end. Kathy Hochul, the incumbent Democrat, 647,000 votes in front of Lee Zeldin, who you may recall voted to object to certifying the election results in 2020 in the states of Arizona and Pennsylvania. Hochul holding on to a lead there. Let's get you a look at Georgia now, this race that we've been talking about all night. Incumbent Republican Brian Kemp nearly 300,000 votes ahead of Stacey Abrams in this rematch from 2018. 82% of the vote in Georgia. Let's turn it over to Casey Hunt now. Casey, you have an update for us on some Senate races.
We do, and we're going to start. Can you fill in the blank for me, Boris? Georgia. We're going to start in Georgia, where Herschel Walker, again, I want to compare this directly to the number Boris just gave you, which was 54% for Kemp. Herschel Walker sitting at 49.6. That is considerably behind, but he is ahead of Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, who holds 48.5% right now. Again, this is so close. Neither one has 50%. We are potentially looking at a runoff, 83% of the vote in Georgia. So let's check in on Wisconsin, which has been tightening over the past hour or so. Mandela Barnes, the Democrat, look, you saw it tighten right there on your screen. Now at exactly 50%, just 4,000 votes ahead of the incumbent Republican, Ron Johnson, at 49.8%. Our friends at the Magic Wall are going to be able to give us a sense of how we may see this move in the next couple of hours with 50% of the vote in Wisconsin. Let's check in on Jake Tapper's Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, also mine. John Fetterman, 49.8%, now below 50%. Mehmet Oz, 47.7%. This race really tightening up as we have been expecting all night. About 75,000 votes separate them right now. I think we can expect a really long time count in this race. 64% of the vote in Pennsylvania right now. And I do want to check in on Arizona because this has been a critical battleground as well. Mark Kelly, the incumbent Democrat, sitting at 58.1%. So he's got a comfortable early lead over Blake Masters, the Republican, at 39.6%. I do want to point out Katie Hobbs is sitting at 57% in the governor's race. So Kelly is slightly outperforming Hobbs. Potential to see a split on that race. There, of course, is only 50% of the vote in here, so we could see this tighten up throughout the night, Jake.
All right, Casey, thanks so much. Coming up, we're going to go live to Georgia as we follow that incredibly close Senate race and whether it may be heading for a runoff. And we're coming up on the first results from the West Coast, including the powerhouse state of California. Back in a moment. And welcome back. CNN has some projections for you now. They are 3 Republican Senate holds. In Iowa, CNN projects that Chuck Grassley, incumbent Senator Chuck Grassley, will defeat retired Admiral and Democrat Michael Franken. Chuck Grassley holds that seat. In Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy, Republican senator incumbent, will defeat Gary Chambers, who you might remember he smoked a joint during a campaign ad. John Kennedy will hold on to that seat, CNN projects. And then in Missouri, the Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, will become the next U.S. Senator from the state of Missouri. He defeats heiress Trudy Bush Valentine. Let's take a look at the balance of power now in the U.S. Senate. You know it's 100 seats. Right now, Democrats have 40 of those seats. Republicans have 43. There are 17 seats remaining. That's what the rest of the night is about. In order to control the U.S. Senate, you need 50 seats plus 1. Republicans need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat. We're about to head into another round of votes. Every contest counts, with the battle for control of Congress still undecided. Just minutes from now, at 11 p.m. Eastern, polls are going to close in California and Idaho, in Oregon and Washington State. This will be another chance for the parties to pick up some of the 218 House seats needed for control of the U.S. House of Representatives. A total of 69 seats are at stake in the 4 states where polling places are about to close. 15 of those seats are competitive, most in California. We're also going to be watching the Senate race in Washington State in the hour ahead. Incumbent Democratic Senator Patty Murray seeking re-election after serving 30 years in the Senate. Her Republican challenger, former nurse and first-time candidate, Republican Tiffany Smiley, is positioning herself as a political outsider. The governor's race in California is also on our radar. The incumbent Democrat Gavin Newsom is a national figure who prevailed over a 2021 recall effort. He now faces Republican challenger State Senator Brian Daly. Newsom has a clear advantage in the state where Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. Will he take a victory and go on and run for president? That's a question we're all asking. In the Oregon governor's race, former State House Speaker Tina Kotek is running to keep the governor's office in the hands of Democrats. Her Republican opponent is former State House Minority Leader Christine Drazan, and there's a potential wild card, Betsy Johnson, a former Democratic state senator who is running as an independent candidate. Almost anything could happen in Oregon when it comes to the governor's race there. Polls are closing out west just minutes from now. Well, let's turn back right now to the nail-biter Senate race in Georgia. Jeff Zeleny is at the headquarters of Republican candidate Herschel Walker. Jeff, Walker spoke just a little while ago?
He did, Jake. He came down here to the hotel ballroom and he said he simply wanted to thank his supporters. And his message was, hang in there a little bit longer. He said he came here to win. He got in this race to win. And he gave an upbeat and very brief message. So there was no declaration of victory. There was no talk about the process. He said he was simply here to win and just to urge patience. So that's what obviously everyone here in Georgia is going to be, is patient for this, because this Senate race has been seesawing back and forth all night long between Raphael Warnock, the Democratic incumbent senator, and of course Herschel Walker, the Republican challenger. Now, just a few thousand votes, about up to 30,000 or so votes separate them. Herschel Walker has the narrow edge, but the Walker campaign tells me they believe that some rural counties, the vote is still out in some rural counties in northern Georgia, where they're fairly optimistic about the election day vote that benefits them. However, the Warnock campaign is still looking at votes here in Atlanta and around the suburbs. They say there is still vote out there for them as well. But Jake, one thing is clear tonight as this moves forward, that Herschel Walker is underperforming Republican Governor Brian Kemp in his reelection effort. He is leading Democrat Stacey Abrams by a wider margin. So clearly some questions here. And one thing, split ticket voting, we've been wondering all season long if there would be coattails or split ticket voting. Definite split ticket voting, but the question here is, can Governor Kemp still bring Herschel Walker over that finish line to 50%? We'll find out in the coming hours, but indeed it could take that long.
That's right. With 83% of the vote in, Walker has 49.7%, Warnock 48.4%. If it stays like that, and there's still a lot of votes to count, stays like that, it will go to a runoff. Let's go to Warnock headquarters in Atlanta right now, where we find our Eva McKen. And Eva, what are you hearing from Warnock campaign folks?
Well, Jake, there is a whole lot of cautious optimism here. Close aides, the campaign manager just leaving the stage, not saying a whole lot, just maintaining that they are feeling good. I did speak with a Democratic strategist working with the campaign, and he says, look at DeKalb County, look at Fulton County, look at the major areas around Atlanta. That is where they are tracking tonight. They are looking to see if the Biden voters from 2020 are going to stick with them. They're also feeling good about these split ticket voters because it is splitting in a way that seems to be good for Senator Warnock. And overall, they are confident in the strategy that they have employed here for the past several weeks by really characterizing Warnock, who is a reliable Democratic vote, but characterizing him as a moderate, as someone who can appeal to a wide swath of Georgians. All of that optimism, though, couched with the fact that a lot of votes still need to be counted. Jake?
All right, Eva McCann, thank you so much. And I'm here with John King at the Magic Wall because we're getting votes in from all over the country. And one state we haven't talked about yet significantly in terms of actual votes is the Badger State, Wisconsin, where there's a very competitive Senate race between incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, the Republican, and the Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, the Democrat. Where are we in Wisconsin?
As you were introducing Wisconsin, it flipped from blue to red. Just moments ago, the Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes was up by 149 votes. Now the Republican incumbent Ron Johnson is up by 851 votes. We had a bit of a seesaw earlier in Georgia, and looks like we're going to have one as we go through the second half of the vote count, if you will, in Wisconsin. 60% of the vote in. Ron Johnson now up to 1,422 vote lead, but you don't need me to say a word, but 49.9, 49.9. So it's 1,400 votes in an incredibly competitive state in recent years. So we're going to watch this play out. We're at 60%, which means we're going to watch it and count for quite some time. Let's just take a look at what we got. Milwaukee is your largest vote pool. It's 16.5% of the state population, and Mandela Barnes getting 66% there to 33%. Just want to check in on the governor's race and see how that's going right there. It's about the same. Tim Michael's a little bit below there. We'll see when you get to the final numbers. Come back to the Senate race, 57%. Again, this is the largest basket of votes in the state. We're only at 57%. Mandela Barnes, if he holds a margin like that, might not stay if this is all early vote, but if he holds a significant margin, just come back to the presidential race just to get a sense of it there. Joe Biden gets 69% of the vote here. So that gives you the target. Joe Biden wins the state by 22,000 votes, gets 69% here. So that tells you what you're going to look for as you come through. Not all races are exactly the same, but you want to stay.
But Barnes and Evers are both underperforming Joe Biden in Milwaukee.
Underperforming Joe Biden at the moment.
Right.
And then you come back out and you look, you see here, Waukesha County, where Ron Johnson's getting 63% of the vote. I just want to compare him to Donald Trump in the sense that when you come here, Donald Trump, so Ron Johnson overperforming Trump by a little bit. As we go through it again, I just want to check the percentages because the percentages can change when you have a mix of which vote is counted, early vote or election day vote. But if that holds up, that bodes well for Senator Johnson in the sense that you have Milwaukee here. You have more of a swing area right here in the eastern parts of the county. As you move into the western parts of Waukesha County, it's Republican territory, and that's where Republicans need a healthy margin here.
This isn't something we really were looking for as opposed to Pennsylvania and Georgia, but is Mandela Barnes underperforming Governor Evers?
I don't know if we have that built in just to check it, but let me look to see if we kept it. I don't believe we have it here as we come through. No, we do.
Well, we can just look at the number.
I can get it for you. I was trying to do it the easy way, but we can do it. We can do it the harder way just by coming through and looking at the big counties, right? And so you look. You have the same idea. Different parties in Georgia, but you have an incumbent Republican governor and the Senate candidate. Here, you have a Democratic governor and his lieutenant governor is the Senate candidate right here. So let's just pick a county here. We just saw it in Milwaukee first. Is Mandela Barnes at 66.4, Tony Evers at 67.4. So the governor running just a little bit up, a point higher, the Democratic governor there. And so then let's move out. Let's drop down south to Racine County here. It's a competitive county. And you have it's 49.5 to 49.2. The Republicans slightly ahead in the governor's race. Let's flip over and look at the Senate race. A more healthy lead for Ron Johnson there. So the Democratic incumbent governor is performing more stronger than his lieutenant governor, who's the Senate candidate here. And if you pull it out, I just want to see where we're missing votes here, where the live outstanding votes are. And you still see, especially down the largest basket of votes still out in Milwaukee and the suburbs around it here. But you see these big red dots. There are a lot of Republican votes out as well. So in a highly competitive state, Ron Johnson has taken a narrow lead. And if you're the Johnson campaign, you see all these red dots up here, Jake, you think, okay, we're in pretty good shape. Let's keep counting.